Committee will come to order. I'd like to begin this hearing by stating the Oversight Committee mission statement. We exist to secure two fundamental principles. First, Americans have the right to know that the money that Washington takes from them is well spent. Second, Americans deserve an efficient, effective government that works for them. Our duty on the Oversight and Government Reform Committee is to protect these rights. Our solemn responsibility is to hold government accountable to taxpayers because taxpayers have the right to know what they get from their government. We will work tirelessly in partnership with citizen watchdogs to deliver the facts to the American people and bring genuine reform to the Federal bureaucracy. This is the mission of the Oversight and Government Reform Committee. In the past month, I've personally spoken with a dad who told me that his high school graduate son is having a difficult finding a job that will hire him for more than 29 hours. Spoken with a mom that brought me her late 20-something son's insurance paperwork, which notified him that his health premiums will increase from just over $200 a month to just over $800 a month starting in January. I talked to a family struggling with their family business because they cannot afford the mandates, but they also cannot afford to sell the business they worked so hard to build. The high-risk pools that hit their max in March of this year, they prevent anyone else from entering high-risk pools. No one disputes that there were concerns with the U.S. healthcare system that predate Obamacare. Chief among those concerns was the rising cost of healthcare that was crowding out other items in family budgets and contributing to massive Federal budget deficits. Obamacare was designed to fix three problems: reduce the cost of medicine, provide universal coverage for every American, and increase the quality of healthcare in America. Americans were told over and over again that if they liked their doctor and their insurance, they could keep them. After decades of work, union members are furious at the changes of health benefits and the traditional 40-hour work week. While the law passed by Congress 3 years ago, implementation of the law has been mired in one problem after another. And according to a report by the Congressional Research Service, the administration has missed approximately half of Obamacare's required deadlines. A recent GAO report on state progress with exchanges found that compressed timeframes and a lack of clear Federal requirements related to the Federal Data Services Hub as a major IT challenge to opening the exchanges for enrollment October the 1st of this year. 2 months ago, the administration delayed Obamacare's employer mandate and several reporting requirements. Although I believe the employer mandate is bad policy, the effect of this unilateral delay by the administration will be that the exchanges will have more difficulties verifying whether individuals have an offer of coverage at work, thus exposing taxpayers to the risk of significant spending on subsidies for those not qualified to receive them, and for those individuals that have received them, a tax burden at the end of the year that will be quite a surprise to them. Everybody okay? Okay. Moreover, the administration only delayed the employer mandate. Individual citizens are still liable for the penalties. Just businesses are no longer liable. State leaders from across the country have complained that the administration has not adequately responded to their questions and concerns. Since many states have part-time legislatures that are only in session during the spring, HHS's failure to issue timely guidance harms states' ability to implement the law and better protect its citizens from its harmful aspects. Today, we are pleased to hear the testimony of multiple state officials involved in much of the day-to-day work in preparing their respective states for the start of Obamacare. We have with us today multiple different witnesses. I'll allow Mr. Spear to introduce some of those. But Lieutenant Governor of Kansas, Jeff Collier, who is also a physician, Florida State Representative Matthew Hudson, Secretary of the Department of Health and Hospitals from the State of Louisiana, Kathy Kleebert, and Attorney General for the State of South Carolina, Alan Wilson. Yesterday, the Democrats on this committee threatened not to participate in the hearing unless we invited 8 Democrat-selected witnesses. Since normally the minority party only selects 1 witness, and even the majority party only had 4 witnesses for this hearing, it seemed like a fairly audacious request. But we didn't want members of this committee that is formed to do oversight work to walk out and fail to hear the serious struggles that states are experiencing as a result of Obamacare and the administration's implementation of Obamacare. So we made the unprecedented accommodation to let them invite the same number of witnesses as the majority. Members shouldn't walk away from states struggling to implement Obamacare. We should listen to their concerns, and we should find solutions. One area that will be explored today is the administration's Navigator and Assister programs. One of the witnesses here today, Attorney General Wilson from South Carolina, along with 12 other Attorneys General, sent a letter to Secretary Sebelius on August the 14th asking questions about the Navigator Outreach Program. As is the pattern of late, the administration has not yet responded. In fact, I spoke yesterday with healthcare leaders in my own state, and they informed me that they cannot get answers from HHS. The navigators they speak to in my state still have no idea what is happening, and we're only days away from October the 1st, that launch date. Fortunately, the committee has conducted oversight of the Navigator and Assister program. I'd like to introduce into the record a preliminary staff report on our findings relating to the Navigator and Assister programs. These findings were largely based on transcribed interviews with top HHS officials and internal HHS documents produced to the committee. The report shows that the Navigator and Assister programs are rife with mismanagement, and they're still struggling to be able to put things together even at this point, and it has the real possibility that a large number of Americans will fall victim to fraud and identity theft. Top HHS officials admitted that the administration failed to conduct any analysis about whether or not it should require all individuals hired by Navigator and Assister organizations to pass a background check or be fingerprinted or have the same basic requirements that census workers have. The administration decided to leave the responsibility for authenticating Navigators and Assisters to the organizations receiving the grants to implement the programs. As a result, the Federal Government will not be able to provide consumers with a list of individuals officially certified as Navigators and Assisters. HHS officials deemed several marketing activities inappropriate, such as door-to-door solicitation and direct phone calls, but have not taken steps to ban those. HHS allows Navigator and Assister organizations to pay their employees based on the number of individuals they enroll, which creates an incentive for those employees to provide biased or incomplete information about Obamacare to maximize employment. We have multiple issues here. Every program in the Federal Government needs oversight. That should also apply to the newest programs in government, like Obamacare. While billions are spent, it's reasonable to ask if it's going well and accomplishing what it was designed to do. Now I recognize the distinguished ranking member, the gentlelady from California, Mrs. Spear, for her opening statement.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to comment on this hearing. Let me be frank. This is not a hearing. This is theater. I wish it was just a little bit more entertaining. This is a bad script with a bad ending because some of my colleagues on the other side didn't like the way the presidential election turned out, didn't like the Supreme Court, including Chief Justice Roberts, finding law to be constitutional, and are simply desperate to rewrite the play. It's time to take the makeup and the costumes off and get real. The Affordable Care Act is the law of the land, and there will be no rewrites, no matter how much you would like to rewrite the ending. I'm sickened by the efforts of some to sabotage this law at every turn. In some states, the elected officials aren't even subtle about it. They don't even try to mask their blatantly political shenanigans under the guise of public interest. Take the duly elected insurance commissioner of Georgia, who was caught on tape bragging to an audience of Republican campaign contributors and activists. Let's play the video.
The problem is Obamacare. Amen. We've got to now determine what we can do to solve that problem. Let me tell you what we're doing. Everything in our power to be an obstructionist. We have passed a law that says that a navigator, which is a position in that exchange, has to be licensed by our Department of Insurance. The Obamacare law says that we cannot require them to be an insurance agent. So we said, fine, we'll just require them to be a licensed navigator. So we're going to make up the test, and basically you take the insurance agent's test, you erase the name, you write navigator test on it.
He said he was doing everything in his power to be an obstructionist. He pointed to the example of the Georgia Republican legislature, which invented a new requirement that Obamacare navigators be licensed. His insurance department would just make up a test requiring navigators to pass the insurance agent's test just to obstruct them from conducting outreach to uninsured people. The only justification for this new requirement is that it helps obstruct implementation of Obamacare. Unfortunately, he is not alone. The only witnesses the majority chose to invite are, like Georgia Commissioner, doing everything in their power to be obstructionists. Florida State Representative Matt Hudson, we thank you for being here, is no particular expert on state concerns about the ACA implementation Mr. Hudson is himself busy creating concerns and barriers to implementation. Recently, he introduced a bill suggested in the state legislator's guide to repealing Obamacare. The poster is behind me, which was published by the American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC, a Koch brothers-funded entity. Not every Republican tolerates the obstructionist tactics. In Kansas, the elected insurance commissioner, Sandy Prager, has struggled to implement the Affordable Care Act, even as Governor Broback sued to challenge the constitutionality of the Affordable Care Act, returned a $32 million federal grant to help the state set up health insurance exchanges, and has called the Affordable Care Act an abomination. Senators McCain and Coburn have both criticized their Republican colleagues for working to bring on a federal government shutdown just to stop the funding for ACA implementation. Senator Coburn called it, quote, dishonest, unquote. Sadly, this is a concerted campaign to deny people affordable health care being conducted by certain Republican elected officials, but it is being orchestrated by entities like ALEC and financed by billionaires like the Koch brothers. I strongly believe in the importance of congressional oversight. It is our job to make sure that the laws of this land, laws passed by Congress, are carried out effectively and efficiently. But this committee is not engaging in oversight. It is not interested in getting to the facts, in seeing the law properly implemented, or in identifying improvements or technical fixes. This committee has instead chosen to undermine the law and encourage the avowed obstructionists who are throwing hurdles in its way at every step of the process. Mr. Chairman, this effort has become a theater of the absurd. While I appreciate that you have now accepted some of our witnesses to try and convince the audience that there is some semblance of balance to your script, your play will not make it to opening night and will be relegated to the dustbin of theatrical failures once the real show begins to run. I sincerely hope that this is the beginning of the end of the charade to undermine a law that has been found to be constitutional, and I would like to remind my colleagues that we are sworn to uphold the law and the Constitution, and that is a duty I take seriously. It's time we actually do our jobs. I want to welcome Louisiana State Representative Katrina Jackson, Senator Brad Hutto of South Carolina, and Senator Eleanor Sobel of Florida. Thank you for joining us today and coming here on your own dime.
I'd like to recognize the Chairman of the Subcommittee on Economic Growth, Mr. Jordan, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for putting this important hearing together where we can hear from folks on the front line. Let me just say in response to the last statement, everyone in the country knows this law is not ready. Yesterday, Warren Buffett said, scrap the bill. Last week, the AFL-CIO voted and said, fix it or repeal it. Headline, fix it or repeal it. Max Baucus, Democrat, not Republican James Lanford, not Republican Jim Jordan, not on this. Max Baucus said it's a train wreck. Howard Dean said it's going to lead to rationing of care. Not exactly Republicans there. James Hoffa said it's going to hurt working Americans, going to fundamentally change the 40-hour work week, which it will, and it's already doing that. Even the President knows this bill needs delayed. That's why he delayed it for big business. We just want to say delay it for the rest of America. I mean, it's unbelievable. It was unpopular when not one single Republican voted for it, and Democrats passed the bill. It was unpopular then. It's even more unpopular now. All we're saying is, I mean, this argument is unbelievable. I don't know that the Democrats have introduced a bill to fund the government. There's been bills introduced by Republicans to fund the government and delay Obamacare, which is exactly what the American people want. And we're going to hear from people on the front line today who know how hard it is to try to implement this legislation. In Ohio, think about this. Last week, headline in an Ohio paper. In Ohio, 7th largest state, 11 million people, not one single navigator, not one, has been trained and licensed, as our law requires, by the Ohio Department of Insurance. Not one. And we are 13 days away from the exchange starting. Not one. 7th largest state, 11 million people. You think this thing's going to work well? You don't think this thing needs delayed? This is unbelievable. Of course it needs delayed, and the American people understand that. And they're just asking their representatives, Republican and Democrats, to recognize that fundamental fact. And this hearing is about highlighting that fundamental fact. And so I would ask the Chair if I can just enter. I didn't read my statement. I just reacted to what we heard before. But this is as clear as it gets. In my time in public life, I've never seen something this obvious make this much common sense and have that much opposition to doing it. Unbelievable. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Recognize the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Economic Growth, Mr. Cartwright, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Jordan and Lankford, for calling this hearing. All across this country, some state legislators and other elected officials are obstructing the Affordable Care Act law, the law of the land, and undermining enrollment in health exchanges. Just this week, Florida Governor Rick Scott issued a directive banning Navigator grantees from operating on the grounds of county health departments. This is particularly obstructive because county health departments are precisely where Floridians with questions about the health care exchanges might turn. Florida Governor Scott also stripped Florida's insurance commissioner of its ability to review insurance rates and protect consumers from unfair or excessive premium hikes. The, quote, rate review, unquote, provisions of the Affordable Care Act require insurance companies to justify any proposed health insurance premium increase of 10% or more. Last year, this provision alone saved 6.8 million consumers an estimated $1.2 billion in health insurance premiums. This is working. In fact, every witness invited by the majority here today represents a state government that is openly obstructing implementation of our Affordable Care Act. These witnesses do not have concerns about implementation. They are creating concerns and barriers to implementation, and they are proud of it. One witness, State Attorney General Alan Wilson, works under South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, who said, quote, "When it came to Obamacare, we didn't just say no, we said never. We are not expanding Medicaid just because President Obama thinks we should, and we're going to keep on fighting until we get people like Senator Tim Scott and everybody else in Congress to defund Obamacare," unquote. Another witness, Secretary of the Department of Health and Hospitals, Kathy Kleibert, works under Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal, who said, quote, "We don't think it makes any sense to implement Obamacare in Louisiana. We're going to do what we can to fight," unquote. Our constituents deserve better than this. Now, one such constituent is right here with us today, Stacy Ritter, a resident of Pennsylvania, my home state. Now, Stacy, if you're here, would you stand up? There she is. Welcome, Stacy. She came here on her own dime. She's here at her own expense, and she's here to tell you, either on or off the record, her compelling story. But I'll tell you what it is right here. It's in a written statement. Unfortunately, the majority has not allowed Stacy Ritter here to present her statement, but I'm going to read an excerpt.
Would the gentleman yield?
Yeah.
I suspect I am the majority. We have an unprecedented number of witnesses here from the minority, 3 when the tradition is 1, and they were selected by the minority, not by the majority. So there were 4 witnesses that we selected. The ranking member sent me a letter yesterday asking for an additional 8. But in order to get them all on one panel, we have the largest panel we ever have, and all 3 of these witnesses were selected by the minority. So I hope the gentleman was mistaken in that portion of the statement.
Reclaiming my time, here's what Stacy had to say. Thanks to the ACA, the girls, she's talking about her 2 daughters, she has 2 daughters with a rare blood disorder known as myelodysplastic syndrome. And what she said was, thanks to the ACA, the girls can no longer be discriminated against if I were to lose or change jobs. Thanks to the ACA, we no longer worry about reaching lifetime caps on coverage. Thanks to the ACA, my girls can remain on my insurance until they're 26 years old, giving them time to finish college and find a job. Now, there are millions of Americans like Stacy Ritter who have needed the Affordable Care Act for a very long time. And, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask permission to insert Stacy Ritter's entire statement into the record.
Without objection.
Now, in fact, in 2007, nearly 10% of Pennsylvanians reported they were unable to see a doctor when necessary due to the cost. Between 2003 and 2009, families in Pennsylvania saw their health insurance premiums increase by 45% to an average annual cost of $13,229. Single policyholders experienced a 38% increase over the same period. Of those who do have health insurance, 53% are covered through their employment, public programs such as Medicaid and Medicare insure 31% of Pennsylvania's population, and 5% of residents purchase individual private policies. This leaves nearly 1.4 million, 11% of the state's population, uninsured for health care. Pennsylvania's children are uninsured at a rate of 8%. This is a figure that doubles to 16% for children living in households with incomes less than 139% of the federal poverty level. Non-elderly adults, those younger than 65 that live in these lower income homes, are uninsured at a rate of 32%. And a quarter of Pennsylvania's non-elderly Hispanic population lacks health insurance. Non-elderly blacks are uninsured at a rate of 17%, and 11% of the non-elderly white population is uninsured. Over the next 6 months, as the health exchanges stand up, Pennsylvanians like Stacy Ritter will finally be able to get the help they need for themselves and their families. Our job is to conduct oversight and not cheer while state officials impede the implementation of enacted federal law. I yield back.
I recognize the Chairman of the full committee, Chairman Issa, for his statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank both the Chairman and Ranking Members for holding this important hearing. As I said earlier, we have a very large panel, and I look forward to getting to that panel. There's an old expression here in Washington, when asked about a tough situation, people will often say, well, some of my friends are for it, and some of my friends are against it, and I want to be with my friends. Now, I've never said, let's defund and eliminate all of Obamacare without viable replacements for many of the things that the Affordable Health Care Act chose to do. Along with every Republican in Congress at the time, I voted against the Affordable Care Act because I felt there were many things in there that were overreaching and that were very lopsided. But let's understand that I think every member on the dais and every member testifying today would say there were problems in health care before President Obama came into office. The Affordable Care Act attempted to say it was going to tackle many of those problems, and some of them we agree on. People with pre-existing conditions finding themselves unable to leave a job, the unemployed college graduate, or for that matter, the returning veteran not eligible for retirement but finding himself unemployed and out of the military, trying to figure out where he or she is going to go to get health care. There are many, many groups that were falling through the safety net of predictable access to health care. We need to deal with that. Very clearly, America's problem is not that we don't have some of the best health care, it's that we have the most expensive health care. One of my concerns is that the Affordable Care Act does little to make it affordable except through subsidy. Attacking the real causes of our health care costing more than any other first world nation is something that we must work on. Ms. Speer, who was fairly new when the Affordable Care Act was passed, said something today that I'm taking some exception to, not on a personal basis because I don't think she meant it, but she said that this law is the way it is and nothing's going to be changed. Well, bad law happens. The Affordable Care Act, for example, mandates that every member of Ms. Speer's staff and every staff member of everyone on this dais is to be thrown off of the Federal workforce's health care system, put into an exchange, and not reimbursed. In other words, the Affordable Health Care Act cut by $5,000 to $10,000 the benefit for people making as little as $25,000 or $30,000 a year as staffers here on the Hill. Now, I'm sure Ms. Speer, if asked, would have said, well, I'm not voting for that, but she did vote for it. It needs to be fixed. We cannot have The men and women who would like to serve members of Congress find themselves working for a deadbeat employer. That's real. It's in the Act. It was in the Act from the Senate, so maybe we in the House can say we have to fix it, but it's there. Now, in the Act is an implementation that has a lot of bureaucracy, including state exchanges. The anticipation was that all states would quickly come together and want to have state exchanges and want to have the subsidies that came with it. What I believe we've seen is a legitimate disagreement between states who do not want to have a limited subsidy that will probably be phased down or out and leave them holding the bag with all the regulations that come with a Federal program. More importantly, this committee has held a series of hearings, and I thank the Chairman, both the Chairman, a series of hearings on the implementation problems, databases, privacy, and so on. These are not intended to kill an existing law. They are intended to make it clear that if it is to go into effect, it should go into effect at a time that it can be effective. Nothing will kill Obamacare faster than, in fact, a series of horrific mistakes, losses of private or sensitive information, or denial of care, or, in fact, huge cost overruns. So I, for one, am not one of those people who said, I'm going to kill Obamacare. I'm going to, in a Machiavellian way, attempt to delay or deny. But as Chairman of this committee, with my subcommittee chairman, we have seen serious problems our witnesses will talk about. Hopefully, by putting all 7 on this panel, we give an opportunity for people who have concerns about the implementation of the Affordable Care Act and those who believe that we are ready to go live in a matter of days to have an appropriate debate. I'm pleased and I thank the ranking member when he made his selection to choose people from responsible positions where they're looking at the Act, and not the benefits of the Act, but the actual Act, and whether implementation will be done properly and on time. I share with the Chairman's opening statement that, in fact, if the President wants to delay one part of a mandate, Congress has to ask, are we ready to go live? Lastly, I think for all of us on the dais, we understand that some parts of the Affordable Care Act are already law. They're already implemented. It is a question of implementing these large, expensive programs with, for example, a database that is today not been tested, but in a matter of days is supposed to go live with all of your personal information transferred from the IRS and your health care information added to it on a daily basis. That is something we should be concerned at. So I join with the ranking member in welcoming this large panel of distinguished individuals who do not agree on everything, but hopefully they will be my friends and agree that we've got to get it right. And if that means, Ms. Speer, changing some parts of the law, so be it. Let's work together on making this an Affordable Care Act in every way we can, while we debate whether or not we can afford some aspects of it. Chairman, thank you for the indulgence. I yield back.
I recognize the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Cummings, for his opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I was very heartened by the words of the Chairman of the committee, and I want to thank all of you for bringing us together today. I want to remind all of us of something that we may have forgotten. This is the law. Hello, this is the law. It has been passed. Chief Judge Roberts of the Supreme Court said it was constitutional. It is the law. And every 2 years, every member of this committee, we put our hands up and we say that we are going to uphold the law. That's where we start. And so I am so appreciative of what the Chairman just said, but the 41 times that we have voted on this, it was not to replace it. No. It was to kill it. Period. To kill it 41 times. And so I want to thank you for, Mr. Chairman, for accepting the witnesses we requested. I want to thank the chairman of the committee. I thank you. They are elected officials from South Carolina, Florida, and Louisiana. After serving as Speaker Pro Tem of the Maryland House, I want to thank all of you, and I appreciate your service. Unlike the witnesses invited by the majority, these officials have tried to implement the Affordable Care Act, even in the face of obstruction coming directly from their own governors, trying to implement the law. Unfortunately, there is a systematic effort by some Republican officials to obstruct implementation of the Affordable Care Act. These officials have openly, it's not a secret, come on now, pledged to fight implementation, harass entities attempting to conduct public education and outreach, and adopted legislative and regulatory maneuvers to sabotage the Affordable Care Act. That's a fact. Last week, Chairman Upton sent letters to 51 state navigator organizations demanding that these community organizations turn over huge amounts of documentation to the Committee on Energy and Commerce. As Norm Ornstein said, and I quote, "This is intimidation and another effort to sabotage. Not replacing anything, not improving anything, trying to kill it." Some Republican state officials have taken a page from the same playbook. West Virginia's Attorney General, Pat Morrisey, recently sent letters to navigator grantees in his state, demanding answers to dozens of questions. One recipient, West Virginia Parent Training and Information, subsequently returned $365,000 in grant money that it had applied for and won. Other states are acting the same way. The problem is that there are tens of millions of people who desperately need the Affordable Care Act to succeed, including in these very states. And as our witnesses testify, I want you to tell us what happens to them. What happens to the people in your states who are sick and cannot get care? And they need members of Congress to do our job and help it succeed through responsible oversight. If I may, I'd like to introduce Ms. Aquilin Laurie. Ms. Laurie, would you stand up? A resident of Virginia and the victim of a stroke she suffered in college. You may be seated, as well as a series of other serious health problems. Ms. Laurie is here today on her own dime. Like millions of other Americans, she has what insurance companies call a pre-existing condition. And when the chairman talked about the good parts of the law, one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that you have to have the whole law to make it work.
Will the gentleman yield?
No, I want to finish my statement. Ms. Laurie traveled. I want to talk about this lady who traveled here who's been ill. Ms. Laurie traveled here today to present her story to Congress. In 2005, and this is her story, and I quote, "I decided to leave my job at a large employer to pursue my dream of owning my own business. However, later that year, I needed emergency gallbladder surgery and suffered complications. At that point, my insurer rescinded my coverage and left me with $50,000 in medical bills during my first year in business. If the Affordable Care Act had been in place then, it would have been against the law for my insurer to drop me from coverage. I'm looking forward to opening of the health insurance marketplace in Virginia this October and the availability of the new health insurance premium tax credit that could potentially make my health insurance even more affordable. I'm also very appreciative that I no longer have to worry ever again about being denied coverage due to my pre-existing conditions, being charged exorbitant premiums that I can't afford, or having my coverage drop if I need another hospital visit. Ms. Laurie, I want to thank you for coming by telling us the story of your life as personal business. You speak for millions of Americans, millions. And I ask that Ms. Laurie's statement, our complete statement, be entered in the record, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman?
Objection.
Thank you. As I conclude, the truth is that nobody really believes today's hearing was intended to help make the Affordable Care Act work better. Now, I must say that I believe the chairman meant what he said. But not everybody is where the chairman is. That's why we've had 41 votes to kill it. Republicans have taken more than 40 votes on the House floor to repeal Obamacare and replace it with absolutely nothing. Everyone knows what this hearing is really about, trying to end Obamacare. This week, House Republicans are threatening to shut down the entire government unless the Affordable Act is completely defunded. Republicans want to eliminate health coverage for tens of millions of Americans, return the keys to the insurance companies, and go back to the days of discrimination against people like Ms. Lori with pre-existing conditions. Ladies and gentlemen, I have said it before, and I'll say it again. We can do better. And the chairman is right. There are things that we can do to improve this. But this may be hard, but this is America. We do hard things all the time. We can do this because people's lives are dependent upon it. With that, I yield back.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Mr. I just point out that the gentleman talked about the law, implementing the whole law. Was the President upholding and implementing the whole law when he gave a delay to big business? I mean, the great speech, give it to the President of the United States. He's the one who said big business gets a delay, but the rest of America doesn't.
Come on now.
Come on now, that's the truth.
No. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
he knows what the President was trying to do was to try to, again, a lot of what is happening.
The gentleman not say,
are you going to let me answer the question?
you got 7 minutes, I just took.
Why did you ask me a question?
All right. Sorry, go ahead and answer the question, sir.
Yes. Again, the President, again, I've said it before, this is hard. And business said that they could not get certain things accomplished. The President gave them that leeway. A lot of the problems that we have in the law is because of things that happened when we were trying to pass it. And trying to compromise here, compromise there. But again, the chairman of a committee is right. You're right. There are things that could be better, but that does not mean we scrap it and throw it out, because people will die. They will literally die. And you know it.
I was making, the gentleman was making the fundamental point. He specifically said, and we can read it back, he specifically said the whole law. And I just want to know if it's the whole law, it should be the whole law, and we shouldn't give some special dispensation to big business, which the President did without even having Congress vote on it.
Mr. Chairman, I take no special privilege, but as a member of the committee, I know that we have witnesses who can deal with some of the challenges that everyone is concerned about, the individual mandate, the corporate mandate, the timeliness of it, and so on. So I hope we can get to it. I join with the ranking member in one sense. This is an important hearing. We will disagree on the purpose of it, perhaps, but I think that as we hear from our witnesses, both sets of witnesses, I think the witnesses will speak for the real intent of the hearing, and I look forward to getting to it and then a lively debate afterwards.
We'll have plenty of opportunity for that in the conversation as we try to determine how's the implementation going and what are the real effects on the ground. With that, members will have 7 days to submit opening statements for the record. We'll now recognize our first and only panel today. The Honorable Jeff Collier is the Lieutenant Governor of Kansas and also a physician.
Mr. Chairman, I have an inquiry.
You have an inquiry?
Mr. Chairman, we normally swear in all of the witnesses. Are we not going to do that today?
We are. Yeah, we're going to introduce all those and then swear in.
Thank you.
We can't have a good hearing without a good swearing in the middle of it as well. Honorable Brad Hutto is a State Senator from the State of South Carolina. Honorable Alan Wilson is the Attorney General for the State of South Carolina. Honorable Katrina Jackson is the State Representative for the State of Louisiana. Ms. Kathy Klebert is the Secretary of the Department of Health and Hospitals for the State of Louisiana. The Honorable Eleanor Sobel is the State Senator for the State of Florida, and the Honorable Matthew Hudson is the State Representative for the State of Florida. Pursuant to committee rules, all witnesses will be sworn in before they testify, and by Mrs. Spears' demand as well. No, I'm just kidding, but we do ask you to raise your right hand. Thank you. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? You may be seated. Let the record reflect all the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. Thank you for that. In order to allow time for discussion, and we will have some good discussion with this, please limit your testimony to 5 minutes. You have a clock that's right in front of you that will start as soon as you begin. Please note as well, we need you to be able to push your button to make your microphone live. When that is lit up and it says talk, you are live on your microphone, and we'll need you to get as close as we can to make sure that we can hear every syllable that you say from there. So with that, I'd like to recognize our first person, Lieutenant Governor. Be honored to be able to receive your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and ranking members. My name is Jeff Collier. I'm honored to be the Lieutenant Governor of Kansas. I'm also a practicing physician who every day this past week, for example, has operated on people without insurance. We take care of them every day. And so this is something that's very personal to me. Like most states, Kansas is facing problems with the Affordable Care Act. It is a drag on Kansas businesses. A July 2013 Gallup poll suggested that small business owners revealed that 41% of business owners said that they were going to hold off on plans to hire new employees because of the Affordable Care Act. And in Kansas, that trend is no different. Wherever I go, the biggest concern I hear is the uncertainty about what the ACA is going to do to small businesses. And in a new development, since my testimony was written last week, it affects businesses such as mine. I'm a sole practitioner. Just yesterday, we had to sign a contract for $3,400 to rewrite all of our compliance manuals to fit in with the ACA. All it does is continues the same HIPAA requirements that we had before, but we just have to have a new form of documentation of that. It is something that doesn't change what we do, but it certainly costs us from new equipment, new jobs, and from taking care of our patients. And so I think you're going to see this everywhere in a lot of different places. Another Kansan named Mike Bergmeyer of Shield Agricultural Equipment in Hutchinson, Kansas, said that he can't grow his company beyond the 44, 45 full-time employees because he needs to avoid the mandates that require companies with more than 50 employees to meet the ACA's requirements. Mr. Bergmeyer's situation is not unique. The Affordable Care Act is a drag on the economy like ice is on the wing of an airplane, preventing it from taking off. This is damaging to everyone, especially the middle class. Now, there is some other issues on operability. One place is where the states and federal government interact to determine eligibility for Medicaid and for the individuals on the exchange. Our state is significantly advanced in doing that, and we have a very good, very strong working relationship with CMS, and a very positive one. Now, as recently as September 6th, I said in my testimony, but we've now heard on September 13th, there are a number of additional technical updates that keep disrupting the time completion for this. In fact, it appears that there's going to be an additional update coming up even before the October 1st deadline. And so that's going to make it very difficult for every state to do that. We're doing our best that there is. But then there's also this contradiction that is set up in determining eligibility. For Medicaid, Kansas and every other state, they've got to look at a person's real income, and if they don't verify that, we would lose federal funding for our Medicaid program. It's very hard for the taxpayers to have confidence in a system where on the exchanges we have an honor system in the first year to verify income. And so it is really a strong dichotomy that I think undermines a lot of confidence in the system. Another issue that we have is dealing with the education and outreach by the federal government. Just recently is when the Navigator programs receive their contracts. As yet, they're supposed to be set up in order to know how the system runs, and we just learned who are those navigators going to be just a few weeks ago, and yet the system is still not able to go live today, and so that they could even practice and be fully formed in that. Kansas has not passed a number of laws about the skill sets of the navigators or anything, partly because we didn't have all of the regulations that had come down. There's also an issue of rates. It is going to be very expensive for us. One of the things that's there is in the state of Kansas, our exchange is only going to have 2 insurers on the entire exchange. 2 insurers. That is not more competition. That's less competition. And in fact, in Kansas, you have more choices in Medicaid than you do in the federal exchange in the state of Kansas. And so we've looked at a number of the price issues and things like that, and it is going to be a challenge for people. Finally, as a physician, I see this every day. I visit with my colleagues. We work together. We serve the uninsured. We've done that before. I've been doing it for 20 years. We will continue to do it in the future. This is not going to solve those issues. This is not going to make health care more affordable. In fact, it sets up new bureaucracies like the $3,400 that I have to spend just now. It doesn't make health care necessarily better. We can do a much better job, and it's best left to the states. Thank you.
Senator Hutto.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank the distinguished members for allowing me the opportunity to address the issue of the Affordable Care Act and how it will affect my rural South Carolina district. The Affordable Care Act would allow 350,000 to 400,000 South Carolinians to obtain health coverage. With Medicaid expansion, an additional 200,000 South Carolina adults could be covered. It's appalling that some South Carolina officials continue to pursue efforts to block our citizens from receiving health care coverage. I'm pleased to be seated by our fine, hardworking Attorney General from South Carolina, a friend of mine, and like me, he is privileged to be an elected official. But from his privileged place as an elected official and the child of an elected official, General Allen Wilson has enjoyed taxpayer-subsidized health care for most of his life. He's never had to worry about having a doctor to see when he gets sick. Yet when it comes to allowing hundreds of thousands of South Carolinians to obtain much-needed health coverage, he willingly leads the opposition without offering any constructive alternatives to their plight. When I go back to the State Senate in January, I'm going to be facing the first bill up, which is a Republican filed bill that will nullify Obamacare. In a chamber which is presided over by the portrait of John C. Calhoun, we are going to debate nullification in the South Carolina Senate. You know, we tried that in the middle 1800s. It didn't work out too well for us then, and it's not going to work out too well this time. What we're looking for is solutions, not roadblocks. Without the expanded health care coverage from the Affordable Care Act, uninsured South Carolinians will continue to be relegated to emergency rooms across the state or to simply suffer in pain without basic care. Treatment in an emergency room for non-emergent conditions is the most inefficient and most expensive form of care. Expanded coverage can allow newly insured to find a medical home where they can be diagnosed and treated for basic human health needs that do not require the attention of an emergency room. Medical homes will allow patient-focused preventative care such as coaching and counseling on nutrition, diet, and physical activity in a holistic approach which will lead to cost-effective health care. It is shameful for us to live in the greatest country in the world and yet have our citizens face the threat of bankruptcy merely because they got sick or injured. Economic ruin should not be the price of having a sick child. By having more of our citizens covered with comprehensive insurance, premiums should be lower. We look forward to a time when all of our citizens can enjoy the coverage that's enjoyed by General Wilson and myself. Some could be covered by expanding Medicaid, others by purchasing affordable coverage through the exchanges, and yet others through their employment. It is this inclusive approach that will allow all South Carolinians to be covered. Full implementation of the Affordable Care Act will benefit taxpayers. Without expanded coverage, the cost of paying for treatment of the uninsured falls now on taxpayers and employers. South Carolinians have paid Federal taxes that can come home to South Carolina once the expansion is implemented. Once everyone is covered, medical costs can be more easily controlled and premium rates should fall. As more people have health care coverage, more providers are going to be needed. The expansion will result in an economic boost to South Carolina. The training of new providers will allow our technical colleges and our universities to grow. We've had a university-based research study done in our state that says that we can expect 44,000 new jobs from the full implementation of the ACA. The salaries from these employees and the expanded services will generate millions in annual earnings and ultimately new revenue for the state. This is in addition to the billions of dollars that will flow back to the state from the Federal Government over the next 6 years. Health care in South Carolina is 20% of our economy. With over 1,100 different occupations, health care sectors in our state employ 250 South Carolinians. These are good paying jobs, jobs built on caring for our neighbors. It's a vital part of our economic sector, and these are jobs that cannot be outsourced. The Affordable Care Act is a huge net benefit not just to those with pre-existing conditions, but to our taxpayers, our hospitals, our doctors, those who will be newly employed, and citizens who will see their premiums reduced. Quite simply, South Carolina needs to accept the benefits being extended to our citizens, if for no other reason than it is the right thing to do. Thank you.
Attorney General Wilson.
Thank you for this opportunity to address the committee. I want to deviate from my introduction briefly to say that several remarks were made that aren't accurate. Earlier, Representative Cartwright mentioned that I was under the governor, under Governor Haley. That is not accurate. I'm an independently elected official in South Carolina. To my recollection, those comments or that quote that was attributed to me was not made by me. My opposition was presented in our briefs before the United States Supreme Court. As Attorney General, I am not in the implementation process. I am here as an advocate for the consumers of South Carolina. Also, I am on government health care, as my good friend Senator Hutto said, but after 17.5 years in a combat tour in Iraq, I believe I'm entitled to be on TRICARE. My testimony today has nothing to do with the merits of the Affordable Care Act. It has everything to do with the first obligation of government, the security and safety of the citizens, as well as sharing with Congress the need to indefinitely suspend implementation of the Affordable Care Act until security risks are mitigated, privacy protections are provided, and legally mandated deadlines are properly met. Despite the President saying last month, we're all on our way to fully implementing the Affordable Care Act, important deadlines are being routinely missed, and more importantly, security concerns are being dismissed. An unpublished Congressional Research Service memo cited by Forbes last month noted that the administration has missed more than half the legally imposed implementation deadlines. In order for the ACA to adequately determine eligibility of consumers for exchange subsidies, it must create a data hub that connects databases from 7 different agencies. Last week, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services confirmed the ACA's data hub complies with Federal standards. However, the hub has not been beta tested, independently verified, or properly audited by the Inspector General. More troubling is the fact that senior HHS technology officials lowered previous standards earlier this year by saying, let's just make sure it's not a third world experience. When it goes live on October 1, it may not be a third world experience, but it will be a con man's all-you-can-eat buffet overflowing with a gold mine of sensitive information from the agency databases that fall under the hub. This information in the hub should be guarded as if it were gold in Fort Knox, not haphazardly. The hub should be at least required to exceed minimally adequate protocols, which have allowed the records of more than 20 million veterans to be compromised during at least 8 hacks at the VA's unencrypted computer system between 2010 and 2013. States are also victims of similar attacks. Exactly 1 year ago, more than 3.6 million South Carolinians were put at risk when hackers obtained our Social Security numbers and personal information during a major security breach at the South Carolina Department of Revenue. Such attacks make the hub's insufficient security testing that much more troubling. However, that is not our primary immediate concern. Last month's letter that was sent by the AGs and myself, 12 other states, was prompted by the fact that HHS is not requiring groups receiving roughly $67 million in Navigator grants to properly screen, train, or conduct background checks on individuals who will be entering sensitive information into the Federal Data Hub. The Vice President of a Navigator group, which received $1.2 million in grants for South Carolina, said last week in the state paper, it's like Girl Scouts selling cookies. If you go to shopping centers and set up tables to capture people as they come and go. The fact is, it's more difficult to help Girl Scouts sell boxes of cookies than it is to become a health care navigator. While groups like the Girl Scouts require employees to complete background checks, there are no such requirements for navigators. This is despite the fact that HHS exchange regulations require navigators to safeguard consumers' sensitive personal information, including but not limited to health, income, employment, tax, and Social Security information. The only requirement for navigators is that they complete 20 hours of online training, less than most states require for a driver's license. This weekend, newspapers across the country ran headlines such as, rollout of Obamacare spawns slew of scams. Con artists are busy dialing seniors and other consumers as they try to cash in on the confusion around the Affordable Care Act. Last week, the Department of Insurance in our state issued a consumer alert due to the proliferation of online, in-person, and telephone scams. The first obligation of government is maintaining the safety and security of its citizens. Ironically, the implementation of a federal program designed to provide health care to all Americans puts us all at severe risk because it is riddled with scams and security breaches. Americans should not have to barter their privacy and financial security for health insurance. Thus far, the administration's implementation of the Affordable Care Act undermines a fundamental responsibility of the federal government, the security of its citizens. Until HHS answers our questions and rectifies this matter by properly safeguarding Americans' personal information, Congress must suspend implementation of the ACA. Thank you.
Representative Jackson.
Members of this committee, I serve in Louisiana as a state legislator as a member of the House Health and Welfare Committee, Joint Committee on the Budget, and the Committee on Appropriations. The United States Supreme Court has emphatically stated what the law is relative to health care in the United States of America in upholding the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. However, we sit here today continuously debating this law instead of working together to ensure that its implementation is beneficial to all states and all citizens of the United States. In a state where almost 900,000, some 20% of Louisianians' population is uninsured, and the health care budget has been cut by 10% each year for 5 consecutive years, we cannot afford to decline any portion of the Affordable Health Care Act. Our governor advocated for us cutting one of the most vital health care services offered to any state's constituency, our hospice care, to take care of the problem, he said. As a state representative who represents Louisiana citizens who have entrusted us with the duty to ensure that we do all we can to represent them, I cannot in good conscience and good moral conscience advocate for the repeal or defunding of the Affordable Health Care Act. For in doing so, I would fail an overwhelming number of the constituency in my state. The Secretary of the Louisiana Department of Health and Hospitals, who sits next to me today, will neglect to mention that she herself and her department published a report that reflects up to a $367.5 million savings while offering health care to over 400,000 of our uninsured citizens, almost half of those on the uninsured roll. Our independent, nonpartisan Legislative Fiscal Office arrived at an even higher number in savings to Louisiana and its citizens, almost $550 million. DHH will stand before you today on behalf of Louisiana, complaining about the difficulty in implementing this act. However, they've wasted countless time supporting measures such as one that we voted down last session in this current year, which would have required us to take a vote of referendum of our people by 2/3 vote in order to enact any portion of the Affordable Health Care Act. Louisiana spends over $600 million in uncompensated care yearly, mainly through DSH dollars that we continuously request from the federal government. We are one of the top 5 states who receive and expend these dollars. Independent reports reflect that the Affordable Health Care Act will save the federal government approximately 50% of all DSH dollars spent around this nation. And by the time, that's the long-term savings. The immediate savings in 2014 show approximately $500 million in savings to this federal government. Louisiana's economy, just like many other states, has suffered during these tough economic times. The full implementation of the Affordable Health Care Act offers an injection of $26.8 billion in our state's economy and will create over 47,000 jobs in the state of Louisiana. It will further aid businesses by contributing greatly to a healthier, more productive workforce. The federal insurance exchange is beneficial to those currently paying insurance premiums by creating a more competitive market and driving down the cost of insurance premiums for everyone. Somewhere in Louisiana and all across this nation, there are younger versions of you and myself who aspire to matriculate in institutions of higher learning without having to worry about whether they will have insurance or not. The Affordable Health Care Act offers them access to the American dream, something that most of us have already been through. By allowing them to remain covered under their parents' premiums, their parents, who are mostly middle to upper class citizens who've paid for those premiums. In each of our great states, just like Ms. Ritter, who sits here today, there are families with children or sick parents who have been diagnosed with life-threatening conditions and have been told that they have reached their mandatory maximum of benefits. I say to you today, our good conscience tells us that we must respond to their need, and the Affordable Health Care Act has done so. But if you don't believe me, a great writer once penned our great Lord and Savior Jesus Christ when he told us that what we do to the least of these, we also do to him. It is time to do what's right.
Senator Cleaver.
Good morning. Thank you for the invitation to highlight how the implementation of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act has presented major problems for Louisiana. My name is Kathy Kleber. I'm the Secretary of the Department of Health and Hospitals in Louisiana. I've served the department for over 25 years, primarily working with individuals who have behavioral health challenges and those with individuals with developmental disabilities. Since the Affordable Care Act was signed into law, we have repeatedly shared our concerns with the law itself and with its implementation. Over the past few years, we have seen our fears become reality, and our decision to not establish a state-based exchange in Louisiana validated. As a complex project with often delayed and frequently changing guidance, it is not surprising that many states, and even the federal government, are narrowing the scope of their Day One exchange capabilities as we near the mandated launch. Though this law was passed over 3 years ago, much of the critical guidance and regulations have only been issued in this past year, and they continue to change. For example, CMS released in June what they claim to be the final version of guidance that will govern interactions between the exchange and state Medicaid programs. However, we have since learned that new changes are forthcoming, which will likely require significant reprogramming efforts for our Medicaid eligibility system. Critical questions often take 3 to 4 months for a response, wasting precious time and resources that easily could have been avoided and cannot be afforded as we near federally mandated deadlines. We've also faced conflicting messages and confusing misinformation. In just one example, we recently experienced confusion about whether pregnancy was considered a qualifying life event for women to enroll in the exchanges outside of the designated open enrollment period. The federal government's own website recently changed the definition of a qualifying life event, removing the event of becoming pregnant and now stating that it is the birth of the baby that qualifies the woman for coverage. After seeking clarification, we've received multiple and conflicting answers from HHS officials. The screenshots included in my written testimony, taken just a few weeks apart, illustrate this frustrating inconsistency. We are also troubled with how HHS is conducting education and outreach in states with a federal exchange, where they've assigned much of the responsibility to federally funded navigators. Named only weeks ago, these groups have had barely a month and a half to prepare. There is almost no oversight or standards for how they will work, and their training requirements have actually been scaled down by HHS. We also have serious concerns about the call centers that will provide much of the direct consumer assistance. We learned from a press release that a call center will be operated in the small town of Bogalusa, Louisiana, but its operations are only starting this month, meaning their employees will have less than a month of training before launch. Just last week, we were alarmed to hear that a constituent who called the exchange hotline was told that many states are expanding their Medicaid eligibility. He was told to first call the state to see if he may now qualify for Medicaid, even though Louisiana has very publicly stated that it will not expand Medicaid eligibility. If the federal call center employees are not equipped with such basic information, how are they to be expected to help individuals navigate this enormously complex program? We've also been frustrated by numerous technical issues that have resulted in duplicate efforts for states, particularly as it relates to the single streamlined application for both Medicaid and the exchange and the new Federal Data Services Hub. For example, we asked CMS for the ability to link directly to the single streamlined application being built at the Federal level, rather than duplicate those efforts at the State level. We were told that each State was responsible for building its own application based on the Federal version, which was not made available until April of this year. We then made multiple requests to CMS this summer for its online application source code in order for our contractor to verify Louisiana's version. It was never provided to us. In March, Federal officials promised to provide States with a no-cost solution to meet the newly mandated modified adjusted gross income standard for Medicaid eligibility. However, we learned in a June conference call that we had the responsibility. We anticipate that it will take our contractor more than 5,000 hours of work to meet all the related mandates for a total cost of $750,000. To frustrate matters further, we learned last week the Federal solution was finally ready, far too late to be useful. While I've only highlighted our major concerns, we expect more problems to arise as October is just 2 weeks away. While these facts raise serious questions about whether implementation of the exchanges should be delayed, we continue to believe the best solution for our nation and our State is that the entire law be replaced and repealed and replaced with a more affordable and market-driven solution that gives States the flexibility to design programs that best meet the needs of their individual populations. Thank you.
Senator Sobel.
Good morning. Chairman Lankford, Chairman Jordan, Ranking Member Speer, Ranking Member Cartwright, and members of the committee, thank you for extending me an invitation to testify today on the Federal implementation of Obamacare, concerns of State governments. I am excited and eager to elucidate the problems we have encountered and address opposition to the implementation of the Affordable Care Act in Florida. My name is Eleanor Sobel, and I represent the 33rd District in the Florida Senate. I was first elected to the Florida Senate in 2008, and I serve as chairwoman of the Florida Senate Children, Families, and Elder Affairs Committee. I also serve as vice chair of the Florida Senate Ethics and Elections Committee, as well as vice chair of the Florida Senate Health Policy Committee, vice chair on the Senate Select Committee for Affordable Health Care, as well as a delegate to the National Conference of State Legislators in an overwhelmingly predominant Republican Senate. I wish I could be here with better news telling you that the State Legislature managed to put partisan politics aside and expand coverage to millions of uninsured individuals. Unfortunately, as you may know, this is not the case. Regular session, our spring session, concluded with the Legislature being unable to pass on a bill to expand coverage. I'm here to also tell you that the State of Florida is actually punishing its people by putting up roadblocks and barricades to obtaining quality, affordable, accessible health care. The message some of Florida's Republican leaders are sending, would you believe, sound something like this: health care is a privilege, not a right, and don't expect help from the government. Another message that's going forth is we are here to put up barricades and obstacles and to create public chaos and misinformation, all in the name of political warfare. The Florida House, Senate, Governor, and Cabinet are divided, split. The Senate wishes to move forward with Obamacare. We came up with a bipartisan bill in the Florida Senate that was a public-private partnership that actually would cover 1.5 million people in Florida, as well as use the $52 billion of the money from the Federal Government to help implement the program. Our Senate President Gates has also made overtures to work with Secretary Kathleen Sebelius. However, the House, Governor, and Cabinet are irrationally and ideologically preventing the execution and implementation of a policy that the citizens of Florida so desperately require. Florida has the second highest percentage of uninsured residents in the nation at 25.3%. Florida has rejected again the $5.2 billion over a 10-year period of Federal Medicaid money, which would have served 1.5 million Floridians. The Florida House will not go along with the Senate's public-private expansion plans, and Governor Rick Scott often contradicts himself, saying he supports Medicaid expansion and then does an about-face by trying to defeat implementation of Obamacare. I want to focus on the two most important Florida sandbag issues that I've encountered in the implementation of affordable health care in Florida. Sandbag number one: what is the best way to defeat a program? Answer: make sure no one knows about it or understands how it affects the well-being of its citizens. Just recently, Governor Scott has implemented a policy that would prevent the 60 departments of health from carrying out much-needed education to the uninsured, claiming that health care education, known as navigators, will be allegedly violating HIPAA laws. This is a desperate attempt to prevent access to those who need health insurance the most. Sandbag number two: last session, the Florida legislature passed a bill that handcuffed the insurance commissioner to use his state authority to negotiate lower rates for premiums for 2 years. Affordable insurance is a key part of Obamacare. Although Florida has agreed to a federally run marketplace, the federal government can only rule if rates are reasonable or unreasonable, but cannot negotiate lower rates. We needed the Insurance Commission to provide the lowest rates possible so people would sign up. Hopefully, tax credits will reduce costs and make insurance affordable. We must find a way to put aside Florida's differences and move forward with the Affordable Care Act. We must move forward with this very, very important act and rectify Florida's political stalemate. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Representative Hudson.
Good morning, Chairman Langford, Chairman Jordan, and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to speak with you today. My name is Matt Hudson, and I'm honored to represent District 80 in the Florida House of Representatives. I also chair the Florida House Health Appropriations Subcommittee, serve as Vice Chair of the Florida House Select Committee on PPACA, and Co-Chair of the National Conference of State Legislatures Health Committee. I'm also a Florida realtor. Remember when you bought your first home? You saved money, found a home you liked. And then what if your realtor had handed you a contract and you had to review it and 3 of the pages were blank? And then when you questioned it, they said, "Trust me." I'm positive none of you would have invested your money that way. I'm positive that the citizens of Florida expect their government to make well-informed decisions, not based on federal promises like, "Trust me." But that's exactly what the ACA has forced us to do. What we do know doesn't look very good. The ACA will make our health workforce shortage even worse and has led to skyrocketing premiums. It has kept states uninformed and puts consumers' privacy at risk through the insurance exchanges. And its Medicaid expansions threaten patients' health and taxpayers' bottom line. The ACA will make our health workforce shortage even worse. By 2020, we will have a national shortage of more than 90,000 physicians and 1.2 million nurses. In Florida, about 13% of our physician workforce is retiring in the next 5 years. And we are currently already short 753 doctors in our 248 primary care crisis areas. A massive influx of government-subsidized health care recipients because of the ACA's insurance exchanges and Medicaid expansions will make things much worse. Because of the ACA, patients will face even longer wait times and worse access to specialty care. Costs will obviously spike as the demand for limited health care services will dramatically increase. The ACA will drive patients' premiums higher. We were promised the ACA would let us keep the plan we like and the doctors we trust. But the premium increases resulting from the web of new regulations and mandates make that an empty promise for millions of Floridians. The Florida Office of Insurance Regulation projects that our small group and individual market premiums will rise an average of between 5% and 40%. Will these folks have to choose between prohibitively high premiums, inferior government-run health care, or no coverage at all? Where is the promise in that? Washington isn't providing answers about insurance exchanges or protecting citizens' privacy. As Florida weighed whether the state or the federal government would build a state-based exchange, we had questions that needed answering. These questions were included in a 3-page November 2012 letter from our House Speaker and our Senate President to HHS. They did not respond until January, after our exchange decision deadline. And the response was just 3 brief paragraphs that did not answer any of our questions. Based on the final HHS rules for federally facilitated exchanges, Florida made the right decision in rejecting a state-based exchange. Still, the timeline and HHS's non-cooperation made an informed decision process impossible. What we did know is that the exchange applicants will have to hand over Social Security numbers, birth dates, employment information, tax returns, and much more, all the information needed for identity theft. And we took action. Florida passed a law that required the registration of exchange navigators, which included background screenings, disqualifications for certain crimes, and penalties for improper actions. Medicaid expansion is wrong for patients and taxpayers. Medicaid is already a problem across the nation. Access is limited and outcomes are poor. The only randomized controlled trial of Medicaid ever conducted found no improvements in health when compared to the uninsured. Still, the Federal Government continues to push Medicaid expansion in Florida. We rejected a Medicaid expansion to add another 1 million people to the Medicaid rolls because we knew access problems would get much worse. And it has been difficult to estimate true costs of expansion. In Florida, official cost estimates for Medicaid expansion range from less than $30 billion over a 10-year period to nearly $55 billion. And then as we learn more about expansion, cost estimates for Florida portion went from $1.4 billion to $3.5 billion. And even these estimates assume that the Federal Government will be able to keep its funding promises despite carrying $17 trillion in debt. States deserve answers to these questions. Washington is notorious for passing laws and leaving states to figure out how to make them work. In the case of the ACA, we deserve to have our concerns heard. Thank you, members of the committee, for giving me the opportunity to talk with you today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you for your testimony, with your written testimony and your oral testimony as well. We appreciate your participation in this. I seem to get a feeling that we have 2 different views today. The difficulty is one group is talking about the dream of what these benefits might someday do and what they might actually occur one day if everything works, and another group that's dealing with the reality on the ground of implementation. And it's not the dream of what might one day become, but what is currently right now and the problems that we face. We have a challenge dealing with this law, to say the least, but implementation is very often the state and the employer and the individual challenge, as every individual has to figure out some way to determine whether their employer has provided them qualified health care and determine what does that mean, or whether they qualify for a subsidy, and if they get that guess wrong, they'll be penalized on their income tax later for getting that guess wrong, or if their dad works somewhere and they take out insurance and get the subsidy, if they'll be penalized because they took the subsidy that because their dad's employer should have covered them, and all of that convoluted mess that has become this. We cannot ignore employers like IBM. Walgreens today, on the front cover of the newspaper, as they've shifted their insurance, did not shift their insurance because they thought it was the right time. They shifted their insurance because they're dealing with the ACA. Unions, as they continue to step up and say there are major problems and issues, we wish these would be addressed. There is the dream of what we hope it will be and the reality of what's on the ground. We have the responsibility to deal with the reality on the ground and to get questions and to be able to work through what is the solution at this point. Attorney General Wilson, you wrote a letter August the 14th with other attorneys general and asked some very specific questions to HHS. Do you recall some of those questions and issues that you asked in August?
Yes, I do. In fact, I have the letter here with me. I believe it was provided to the members of the committee, but we can provide that.
We can have that in the record.
Our concerns, and again, I'm not here today as an implementer because that is not my role as Attorney General. I'm here as an attorney for the state and the citizens of South Carolina and as a consumer advocate. And the questions we outlined in the letter dealt with screening of personnel, guidance to program personnel, the navigators, so to speak, the monitoring of personnel. Other areas of concern were who bears the liability? Is it the exchange? Is it the individual navigator? Is it the sponsoring group that receives the grant funds? What notice to consumers are they going to get? Fraud prevention and remedies was another area that we asked questions under. We had questions about penalties as well as supplemental state regulations. What can the states do without running afoul of preemption issues in protecting our citizens? So our questions, we sent this letter to HHS. We're still waiting on an answer.
So no response at this point?
No response at this point that I'm aware of.
Okay. Lieutenant Governor, you seem to be a person that's trying to obstruct something that's going to help people and take care of people. Yet you speak of taking care of people for free and caring for the folks. You also speak of $3,400 just last week in additional compliance costs in your office, and I can't imagine what that is multiplied around the country of millions of dollars of additional compliance costs that's been added to it. My question for you is, what could the State of Kansas do to take care of their people, or have they already done something to be able to take care of their people that need health care?
Yeah, this is not a simple answer. There's not just one single answer. But let me give you a couple of examples. The State of Kansas, unlike almost every other state, we've gone through an overhauled our entire Medicaid system. We did not throw anybody off our system. We did not cut rates. But we're able to save $1 billion, and by competing it out, we actually are giving everybody now 3 choices where they didn't have choices before. And in that bidding process, we actually got additional services for people and are starting to look at long-term health care outcomes. In the state legislature, we passed a bill that got rid of mandates so that people could have a choice on a more affordable insurance option now in the state of Kansas. We have worked on this in a whole variety of areas, saying of medical homes, our indigent clinics, and working on this in a very comprehensive way.
So there are state solutions that you're proposing on this?
Absolutely.
They're walking through this. And I'm going to be real close on time just to let everyone know on it. The 5-minute time, because of the number, and then we have 2 different subcommittees together, I'm going to try to stick right on the 5-minute time for questioning on that. And so with that, let me recognize Mrs. Spear.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and I will abide by your time frame as well. Let me just say I was very impressed to hear that the chairman of the full committee now is of the opinion that we should be fixing the Affordable Care Act, not repealing it. And unfortunately, I regret that he's not here right now, because last year he was a co-sponsor of H.R. 2, which was in fact a bill to repeal the Affordable Care Act. So he's had a change of heart, it appears, based on his comments today, and I'm pleased to hear that. Let me start by asking each of you, do you receive health insurance as government employees through your states? Just raise your hand if you do. So everyone except for the Attorney General. You receive yours through TRICARE, is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. I know why you receive it through TRICARE, because with TRICARE, which is what my brother has, you pay $500 a year for health care. It's pretty remarkable that that insurance is available.
Gentleman, yield for a second.
No, I'm not going to yield. I have very few seconds in my opportunity, and so I think we're all going to just be able to ask our questions. So let me ask you all this. The presentations that you have provided today, particularly the Republican representatives, were pretty remarkable in that they were elaborate, they were footnoted, and I'm curious, when were you asked by the committee to participate in this hearing?
About Wednesday or Thursday of last week? I think Thursday.
Okay, Attorney General?
Week or 2 ago.
Week or 2 ago, all right. And Secretary Clybert? Thursday?
Thursday.
And Representative Hudson?
Mid last week, Wednesday,
Mid-last
Thursday.
week. So pretty impressive that you've been able to put together those kinds of statements with footnotes. I mean, that's something I did when I was in college, and I didn't do it very well. I guess my question to you is, did any of you have any assistance, anyone help you develop your statements?
Sure. Actually, Ren, my staffer and our staff, we were literally working at this, footnoting this at 1 a.m. on,
All right, thank you.
on Monday morning.
Attorney General Wilson?
Yes, my staff and I prepared the remarks.
All right. Secretary Clyburn?
Yes, certainly my staff that's involved in the implementation and involved in our Medicaid program helped, as well as my
Representative Hudson?
Yes, Florida House Health Policy staff.
All right. To your knowledge, did any of them do this in conjunction with ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council? They're very similar. Many of them drafted in a way that would suggest that there was collaboration.
No.
No?
Not to my knowledge, no.
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 All right. Thank you. Let me then move forward with the 1 minute and 33 seconds that I have left and ask a couple of questions. Bobby Jindal, who is the governor of Louisiana, recently said, let me see if I can get to it. He said, we don't think it makes any sense to implement Obamacare in Louisiana. We're going to do what we can to fight it. Ms. Jackson, in your opinion, is it a significant challenge to the ACA implementation when the chief executive of a state is so strong-willed in their commitment and interest in not implementing the law of the land?
It has been one of the most difficult challenges, past him himself as an elected official, basically attempting to prohibit his implementation. Every letter sent to the Department of Health and Hospitals from any Health and Welfare Committee member or any legislature has been met with delay, and sometimes we've been told that it was not part of the public records request. It's also difficult, if I can, when you have a Secretary of the Department of Health and Hospitals, with all due respect, who's only been there 6 months and trying to implement a major privatizing of our Medicare program as we speak, along with attempting to obstruct this implementation.
I thank you, and my time has expired.
Thank you, Chairman Jordan.
I thank the Chairman. Let me just start first with the reason I asked if the gentlelady would yield is, my guess is, and the Attorney General can speak for himself, but my guess is the reason he has TRICARE is because he wore the uniform of our country and served our nation. I believe he even served in combat. Is that correct, Attorney General?
Yes, that's correct.
Well, we appreciate your service, and you're simply getting what you're entitled to. Lieutenant Governor, let me start with you.
No, as
Medicare. You are a physician and elected statewide. Do you think it makes sense to delay the Affordable Care Act?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Attorney General Wilson, you represent an entire state as well. Your job is to look out for consumers. You've asked questions of HHS and CMS. They've yet to answer your questions. Do you think it makes sense to delay the Affordable Care Act?
From a security and a privacy interest standpoint, I do. And one other comment, I would like to know what plan under TRICARE allows me to pay $500 a year, because I pay nearly $200 every month.
Yeah.
Just wanted to.
Your wife would probably like to know that.
My
too.
wife wants to know
Yeah.
where we get that plan.
Let me go to you then, Senator Hutto. Am I pronouncing that right? Hutto, I'm sorry. So, based on what you said in your testimony, you probably disagree with the guys on either side of you. You think that the Affordable Care Act should move forward and the law should go ahead and be fully implemented. Is that correct?
That is correct. I won't tell you that it will not, that it will be seamless.
So let me ask you a couple questions. Let me ask you a couple questions. Was Howard Dean wrong when he said the Independent Payment Advisory Board is essentially a health care rationing body? Was he right or wrong when he said that about the Affordable Care Act?
I don't think it's going to be a rationing body, no.
Was head of the Teamsters, James Hoffa, wrong when he said that this law is going to result in hurt working Americans and fundamentally change the 40-hour work week? Was he wrong?
I think he was.
He didn't know what he's talking about.
No, we're going to have to work through this.
Was the AFL-CIO wrong last week at their convention in Los Angeles where they said fix the bill or repeal the whole darn thing? Were they wrong, or?
Yes.
They're wrong too. Okay. Was Senator Baucus, a guy who helped write the bill, head of the Senate Finance Committee, pretty accomplished public servant, was he wrong when he referenced that this bill was a train wreck?
That was taken out of context, but yes.
He was wrong too. Okay. And Warren Buffett yesterday, probably most people would say fairly sharp individual, you know, made a few dollars in his life. Was he wrong yesterday when he said we should scrap the entire bill?
We've got to fix the bill, not
Was he right or wrong? So far, everyone's been wrong, and you're the only one who's been right.
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we need to work together.
The President's hometown newspaper 3 weeks ago, lead editorial, final paragraph of the editorial said, delay the entire law. Chicago Tribune endorsed the President both times he ran for office, both times he ran for the President. Were they wrong when they said delay the entire bill?
That's their opinion.
Their opinion? But I'm asking you, were they right or wrong?
I think they were wrong.
So, this is amazing. We need to have you up here more often because you're right and everyone else is wrong. Let me ask you this. Does it make sense when you still think this bill should be implemented when Kroger, major employer in our state, announced last week that 11,000 employees, their spouses, would no longer be covered by their insurance? Is that a good thing? Is that a good result for the Affordable Care Act?
That is not a good thing, but I'm sure there are alternatives.
United Parcel Service announced recently that 15,000 workers, their spouses and families would no longer be covered. Is that a good thing?
There's going to be a good thing when hundreds of thousands of new people are covered.
Let me just turn to the Attorney General. When you deal with protecting consumers in your state, so when a company says where they offer a product and they have a guarantee, and someone purchases that product and the guarantee is not met, the consumer gets a chance to take the product back and get something new or get their money back. But what we have here is we had the guarantee that if you liked your insurance, you'd be able to keep it. And we just know Kroger, UPS, University of Virginia, Trader Joe's, and I can name a whole bunch of other companies who are now telling people because of the Affordable Care Act, you will no longer be able to keep the product you thought you were going to be able to keep. I mean, that to me is, if for no other reason, that's why we should delay it, because the guarantee that the President said and everyone who supported this bill said was going to be in place is no longer in place. Would you agree?
Yes.
All right. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Mr. Cartwright.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all the witnesses who came here today to share your expertise and your insights on the implementation of the Affordable Care Act. An exciting time in America. October 1st, it's time to start getting signed up for the health care law to make sure we get the word out. It's healthcare.gov. Get right on there, enter your information, and it's going to be easy, and it's going to be interesting, and it's a new dawn in American health care. I want to start with you, Attorney General Wilson, and I want to thank you for correcting my misstatement. You work with Governor Nikki Haley, not under her, and I appreciate that. And in fact, I also want to thank you for your military service. I don't care if you're Democrat, Republican, pro-ACA, anti-ACA. If you deliver military service like what you did, you deserve the thanks of all of us. And I want to expand on our discussion of Governor Nikki Haley. Were you attempting to distance yourself from her remark about the importance of defunding Obamacare in Congress? Were you trying to get away from that remark?
No, Representative. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to appear today here. I am an elected official, but I'm trying to wear the state's lawyer hat. I fought Obamacare in the court all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. In fact, the Supreme Court agreed with the states and the NFIB on every issue we presented except for the fact of whether or not the mandate was a tax or penalty. But we lost the fight. And so now, if it is the law of the land, my job is now as the lawyer for the citizens of South Carolina and as a consumer advocate to ensure that their information is protected.
Well, General, you're a prosecutor. You know what a yes or no question is. Yes or no, do you agree with Governor Haley when she says everybody else in Congress needs to defund Obamacare?
I believe it is good policy, yes.
You agree with that? And is that why when you were engaged in the fight in the Supreme Court arguing that the ACA is unconstitutional, is that why you made the public comment publicly comparing the ACA to committing robbery? Is that why you did that?
I don't recall that comment. I don't dispute that I made it, but I don't recall it.
All right. I want to switch over to you, Senator Hutto. You made the comment that my brother, Congressman Jordan's quote of Senator Baucus was taken out of context. Congressman Jordan has not been bashful about doing that, talking about the train wreck. The full context was that Senator Baucus said and meant that if the ACA is not implemented properly the way it's meant to be done, it could turn into a train wreck. Is that your recollection?
Absolutely. And I think what he's saying is we need to work together to make sure it is fully implemented correctly.
Thank you, sir. And I want to jump over to you, Senator Sobel. It's a pleasure to have you here, Senator. For all the things that you've done to help seniors and health care in Florida. I want to remind everybody that Senator Sobel has been talked about by the South Florida Sun-Sentinel as, quote, a strong voice in Tallahassee for education, health care issues, and senior citizens services. So welcome. Nice to have you here, Senator. And you've heard about what we've been talking about here. This hearing is about challenges facing ACA implementation. This week it was reported that in Florida, Governor Scott issued a directive banning navigators from operating on the grounds of county health departments in Florida. Senator Sobel, in your opinion, was this move intended to obstruct implementation of the Affordable Care Act?
Yes, I believe so. These health departments have the kinds of people that actually need health care. They go to these health departments because they don't have a private physician, they don't have health insurance, and by not allowing them on the property, and some of these properties are owned by counties, by the way. Broward County owns its own property, so they worked out a compromise that they could work outside and sign people up. But that's not good enough because you cannot get to people who don't show up on that day but showed up in the past. And this is a tremendous group of people who desperately need health care, and Governor Rick Scott is denying them that access and information.
Thank you for that. I yield my time.
Thank you. Chairman Issa.
Thank you, Chairman. General Wilson, I heard your testimony. I apologize. We have a classified briefing going next door on another program of interest. But you said something a moment ago. This is the law of the land, right? But you have an opinion that there are some aspects of this law that were defective in how they did things. And let me just run you through one of them. Under the Act, currently, my state, Ms. Spears' state, Medicaid, the poorest of Medicaid recipients, it's a 50-50 deal. Federal government throws in 50% on Medicaid. The state pays 50%. Under the Affordable Care Act, for the first 3 years, it's 100% paid for by the Federal taxpayer. Afterwards, it's supposed to go to 90%. Now, isn't it a legitimate concern of states that a promise to pay more for less poor people, less needy people at 90%, while the more needy people are being reimbursed at 50%, and 100% for the first 3 years, is inherently likely unsustainable, that in fact the bargain in the Act that we had to pass before we could read it created a situation in which some of these things are simply not believable. Is that correct in your assumption?
That is correct.
And in your state of South Carolina, wasn't that one of the reasons that the Governor had concerns, is that it's all going to be sugar from Federal government for the first 3 years, and then after that, it's at the whim of a Congress that's borrowing $1 trillion a year, right?
That is correct.
Now, in the case of the recent release of 2,400 private emails, personal Social Security numbers, even before the Act was implemented, isn't that one of your concerns, is that this highly personal information, the question of what your Social Security number is, but the question of whether or not, you're being treated for venereal disease, or you have a persistent illness of some sort, or whether you're a diabetic. All of that is exactly the kind of information that you're charged to make sure does not become public, since that's historically private information.
Yes, that is correct.
Now, the conversation about people coming into county health centers and so on, isn't compliance with HIPAA, making sure that only doctors and cleared medical professionals have access to this kind of information as to what you or I or anyone else is receiving the medical concern? Isn't that a legitimate concern of letting basically a salesman into a hospital or clinic facility?
And that is correct, and that is a concern I had about HIPAA not applying to potential navigators that are helping people enroll in the exchange.
But these navigators will, in fact, be gathering exactly the information that HIPAA is supposed to prevent from going into people not very specifically cleared. True?
It is very potential, yes.
Well, Ms. Spear perhaps paraphrased what I said, and I want to make sure that we get it correct here. I think that the Affordable Care Act currently will be a train wreck. It doesn't answer serious questions about cost and privacy. Now, I was saying, and Ms. Spear, I want to make sure I'm clear, there were problems when President Obama came in that had not been addressed. Rising cost of health care, an interesting cliff that causes people to choose to not earn more than a certain amount, because if you earn less than a certain amount in America, you've got $20,000 or $30,000, maybe $40,000 worth of benefits that come to you. When you earn a little more, you lose those benefits. The Affordable Care Act, in my opinion, even exacerbates that more because of the nature of the means testing and so on. So do I want to address the issues of cost of health care, access of health care? Absolutely. And I would make it clear, and any member on the dais can get more information from our staff, we have been working on a change to FEHBP to make it compliant with the exchange systems, if you will, that are envisioned in the Affordable Care Act. We are responding to, at least as to the 2 million Federal workers and the 8 million covered individuals, the reality of a law. But don't confuse my votes repeatedly to repeal as either only wanting to repeal or somehow not being against the Affordable Care Act. I believe that a bill that was 100% partisan, voted on without a single Republican vote or any real input, that we had to pass it before we could read it, and that has material flaws which are numerous, in fact, is a bill that should be started over again. Now, having said that, I appreciate our panel, and I'm going to continue to hear what you have to say. And I would note, because the Chairman and the Ranking Member is not here, that I want to thank all the witnesses. I've checked, and all of you came here without the Federal Government paying you a dime to come here. So since you all came on your own dime, I'd like to add to the list the thank you. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Mr. Cardenas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My first question is to Mr. Hudson. In your submitted testimony, you stated, and I quote, "These provisions require insurance companies to accept all applicants, even if they wait until they get sick before applying for coverage, and the insurance companies are now prohibited from charging premiums based upon likely costs." Is that accurate?
Thank you. Yes.
Okay. Are you referring to the guaranteed issue and community rating provisions of the Affordable Care Act?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. Personally, I can't understand why you would oppose these important consumer protections in the Affordable Care Act. A recent analysis by the Department of Health and Human Services estimates that between 50 million and 129 million non-elderly Americans have some kind of pre-existing condition. Without the guaranteed issue and community ratings protections in the Affordable Care Act, these pre-existing conditions would put them at risk of not being able to obtain health insurance if they are self-employed or experience some other change in life circumstances. I think, for example, we heard the story of Aquilyn Lowry's story. She was here earlier, which the Ranking Member Cummings described in his opening statement, is illustrative of the importance of these consumer protections in the Affordable Care Act. Due to her pre-existing condition, a heart condition that she had suffered from since 1990, Ms. Lowry has been unable to obtain consistent health care coverage since 2005. In 2005, when her insurer rescinded her coverage and left her with a $50,000 medical bill. Thankfully, she was able to obtain insurance through a high-risk pool established by the Affordable Care Act and was covered when she had a heart attack this past May. I'm grateful for that. She's able to be here with us today. And another question, Mr. Hudson, in the state of Florida, if somebody suffers a heart attack and they do not have insurance, what is the likely scenario from that moment forward? I would assume that if somebody has a heart attack and somebody witnesses, let's just say an ambulance shows up, what's the likely scenario after that when the ambulance shows up and tries to, attend to somebody without insurance who just had a heart attack?
Thank you for the question. I would assume it would be the same in your great state of New Mexico.
No, I'm from California.
Or California,
Continue.
Excuse me, where another great state.
Thank you.
Where, frankly, EMS would try and revive that person to the best of their skills and ability, and they would transport that person to a hospital. In my state, that is prohibitively challenging, as I have 8 counties without hospitals.
Okay, now say that person were fortunate to arrive at a hospital, and then their condition was, in fact, adhered to. Say they revived that person, say that person had some kind of surgery or what have you. Then there comes a big list of expenses. What would happen to that list of expenses when that person without insurance ended up showing at a hospital due to a heart attack? Then what would happen with the bottom dollar, the bottom line of that expense? What would likely occur with that expense? Would the state eventually end up picking up some of that cost? Perhaps the hospital would absorb a portion or all of that cost. What is the likely scenario? You are the chairman of the Health, what committee are you chairman of in the State Senate in Florida?
It's a State House, and it's Health Appropriations.
Okay. So what would likely happen to that dollar amount, whether it's $40,000, $80,000, $120,000, whatever?
Likely what would happen is that patient would be treated, would be stabilized under your act of EMTALA, and then sent home after they had been stabilized. The cost of the care could be incorporated under charity care through that particular hospital. It could be facilitated by DISH funds or low-income pool funds.
Okay. So to my point, ladies and gentlemen, it's the Affordable Care Act is trying to find a solution to all of those situations in the great state of Florida and the great state of California and every state in the nation. What the Affordable Care Act is trying to address, and that is the overall cost and who will bear that cost at the end of the day, and trying to provide a system that actually is better than the system that we have today, because I know exactly what happens when that occurs. The person who actually had the heart attack does not bear the burden of that, and the insurance companies in the state of Florida or California do not inherently bear that burden. It will eventually be a taxpayer system that will bear that burden, and or a private or public hospital that actually adhered to that patient who suffered a heart attack and got administered some health care. So what we need to understand, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll end quickly, Mr. Chairman, thank you so much, is that the Affordable Care Act is trying to transition into a system that is more appropriate for this great country to address the ills, the healthcare ills of all Americans. And the current system leaves 50 to 129 million out because they have pre-existing conditions, and those people with pre-existing conditions who don't have health care will end up in the system and costing American taxpayers even more.
Would the gentleman yield? Chairman. Would the gentleman yield?
I will.
My time has expired.
His time has expired, but I would extend 30 seconds.
Just quickly for a question. So if I understand correctly, the Affordable Care Act, which costs hundreds of billions of dollars of taxpayers' money, replaces the idea that taxpayers pay money. Didn't you make essentially the point that the taxpayer is going to pay it under the Affordable Care Act involuntarily, and the taxpayer is already paying it? People are not failing to get care. Under the Affordable Care Act, you simply have taxpayers paying for the insurance in addition to paying for somebody if they go to the hospital.
That's an interesting interpretation. That's not what I said. At the end of the day, under a new system, if we implement the Affordable Care Act properly, what we're going to have is more Americans with health care coverage and true access to health care, unlike what we have today. Thank you.
The challenge is, even CBO has said at the end of it, full implementation, we'll still have about 31 million Americans still not covered.
With an M, not a B, right? 31 million Americans?
31 million, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mr. Woodall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for coming. I'm from the great state of Georgia. This is my insurance commissioner that you see up there on the wall. And candidly, Mr. Chairman, I couldn't tell if that was you or the ranking member who put that up there, because what I'm going to tell you will not surprise you all at all. Ralph Hudgens, our insurance commissioner, loves Georgians. He loves people and he cares about people, which is why he got involved in public service and ran to be our insurance commissioner. It's a constitutional office in our state, insurance commissioner. And what he said there is, we were talking about how to get coverage for Georgians, how to get affordable care for Georgians, and he said Obamacare is actually the problem. And I'm going to do everything I can to obstruct it from creating those problems. I have a high deductible medical savings account. My policy was outlawed by the President's health care bill. Now, I can afford to buy a more expensive policy, but a lot of folks in Georgia who relied on those high deductible policies can't afford to buy something. What I wanted to ask you all, representing different states and different opinions, what is it in the President's health care bill that you like, that's going to be valuable for your constituents back home, that you in your state, with your governor, with your legislature, with your insurance commissioner, that you all couldn't have done on your own if you thought it was the best plan for your state? What is it that you needed the benevolence of the federal government for? What permission did you need from Washington to implement some of these things that are really going to pay off for your constituents back home? If I could start with you, Governor.
Nothing. I mean, solutions are best where it is local, and all of our states have different problems and different solutions there. We have a number of solutions that we could do here in the state. It is all of these regulations that are there. Sure, we would like to have the money in the state so that we could implement some things there, but there are so many strings attached that it really gets in the way of a lot of things that prevent us from getting better outcomes.
Senator, let me ask you, I actually went to school in South Carolina. My understanding is the very modest health care plan that I had in college is now outlawed as well, so students will no longer be able to have that. But what is it that South Carolina is going to benefit that you all couldn't have done in the Senate with your governor and your insurance commissioner?
Well, what we're looking forward to is not using the emergency room as the medical home for so many people, and the money that we're going to get from the federal tax dollars that our citizens pay coming back to us is going to help us implement that.
I talk about that regularly. I don't have any dollars to spend except the dollars your constituents send to me that I turn around and give back. I'm pretty sure we take a cut off the top, but I'm glad that folks see that as a glass is half full, that some of those dollars will come back. Mr. Attorney General, is there anything that's going on in South Carolina that you needed the Fed's permission in order to implement?
Yeah. I'm a strong federalist. I believe that the problems can best be solved by the states with a few exceptions. But I've looked at the numbers. It's been a year, but it would have been cheaper for the federal government just to cut a check to every American who didn't have health insurance, as opposed to basically create this huge Goliath of a bill. It would have been cheaper just to write a check and give it to people without insurance than do this.
That's the way my math looked too, Attorney General. Though in fairness, President Clinton and Newt Gingrich, Republicans and Democrats, came together in 1996 with HIPAA to solve all of these pre-existing problems for federally regulated plans. We just said at that time, states are pretty smart folks. They've got smart people running those programs, and so we won't get into their business. I'd ask you, Rep. Jackson, in 1996, we said, let's leave it to the states. The states will love their constituents more than we do. Is there something that you were unable to do to serve your constituents that you needed our permission from Washington to get done?
Of course, if you heard any of my testimony today, I talked specifically about our state governor and the Department of Health and Hospitals advocating for cutting hospice care for those uninsured patients. We couldn't even provide hospice care. And to the extent that we would try to regulate interstate commerce, then of course, the states are limited on their regulation of interstate commerce, which are most insurance companies. And that argument has been made at the Supreme Court.
So when you're thinking about what you can and can't do in Louisiana, you're saying you all don't have enough money to get these things done. You're counting on us taxing other Americans, and you'll be getting more than your fair share.
Oh, not at all, sir. What we count on is that the money we send to the federal government that our taxpayers in Louisiana pay would be distributed in a manner that we can take care of all citizens in our state, just like other states count on that as well. But we do pay federal taxes. And to that extent, we are afforded or should be afforded our rightful share of those Federal taxes. And that is
There's
the
no
bottom
question
line.
about that,
Yes.
and I suspect that's something you'll find good bipartisan support on. Madam Secretary, is there something that Louisiana really needed the Fed's permission to get done?
No, I don't think anybody could be more passionate than myself about providing uninsured care for our citizens. However, I believe several things. One, we've done a very good job providing uninsured care. We've had a state charity system. We have recently changed that to a public-private partnership, which has eliminated a two-tiered system for the uninsured. We don't use we don't use emergency rooms as our medical homes. We have opportunities for people to receive outpatient care as well as follow-up care after they've received inpatient care if needed for every uninsured person in our state. So certainly I believe that, I actually believe that implementation of the Affordable Care Act will be detrimental to those that we're trying to help in the long run.
That's what we believe in Georgia as well, but I look forward to sharing our ideas with you all and you all sharing your ideas with us. I'm convinced if we have 50 different projects going on here, we're going to find at least one that successfully serves America and we can implement.
We definitely would love to have flexible and outcome-driven health care, and we believe that we can do that within the system that we have without having the complications of the implementation of that.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Duckworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to yield my time to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Economic Growth, Job Creation, and Regulatory Affairs, Mr. Cartwright.
Thank you, Congresswoman Duckworth. Senator Sobel, I want to return to you. You know, you're from Florida, and I'm from Pennsylvania. In my home Commonwealth, we have a figure of uninsured citizens of almost 12%. That pales in comparison to the 25.3% uninsured in your state. And so obviously, in your position, with your set of values, this is something that you've been worrying about, something you've been working on for many years. Am I correct in that?
Yes, sir.
So I want to follow up. Senator Sobel, do you believe that your Governor Scott is investing the resources necessary to ensure that Florida residents have the information they need to enroll in affordable quality health care in the Affordable Care Act exchanges?
Thank you very much for that very good question. I don't believe that there has been anything budgeted or used by the Governor to inform people about the Affordable Care Act.
So we all know that getting on healthcare.gov, you know, is easy enough for young people, but you have some folks in Florida that may not be as facile with computers. They're the people that need us to go the extra mile to make sure they understand how to sign up. Is the Florida administration doing everything it needs to be doing to help those people?
The Florida administration is not, to my knowledge, doing much or anything to educate the people about this program. And I believe the best way to kill a program, destroy a program, is not to get the information out to the people who actually need that information. So it's become a formidable task to make this program a success and to have people get the health care that they need in a way that they understand it.
So let's you and I give Governor Scott some help, shall we? Tell us, what should Governor Scott be doing to ensure that implementation of ACA, the law, goes smoothly?
Well, first of all, I think that he should allow the health departments to allow the navigators on the premises and to work with the people in the health department. I also think that he should be establishing a website probably in the state, which we might have one, but nobody knows about it, telling people about the Affordable Care Act. I believe that he should be speaking about it in his conferences, press conferences, as well as sending out information that it's now available. None of that is happening.
Well, now, switching gears for the moment, the rate review provisions in the ACA require insurance companies to justify any proposed rate hike of 10% or more. Last year, this provision saved 6.8 million consumers in this country an estimated $1.2 billion in health insurance premiums. Unfortunately, in Florida, the legislature recently passed, and Governor Scott signed, legislation stripping Florida's insurance commissioner of the authority to review health insurance rate hikes. Congressman Joe Garcia, my colleague, has called this move, quote, a cynical attempt to undermine protections for Florida's consumers in order to sabotage the implementation of the Affordable Care Act. Senator Tobel, do you agree?
Yes, I do agree with the handcuffing of our insurance commissioner. At this particular time, he can only, well, first of all, previously he could have negotiated the rates. Right now, he can't say anything or do anything for the next 2 years.
So what's the point of just doing this giveaway to health insurance companies?
Well, I think the underlying premise here is that the rates will be so high, people will not sign up. And you lose the affordable in the Affordable Care Act, and that's wrong. But the insurance commissioner has indicated, and rightfully so, that there are tax credits to be had. So the rates that the 30 to 40% rates that he's talking about of an increase will be mitigated with the tax credits people will get for signing up. But, but the headlines are 30 to 40%.
And it's misleading. Well, thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you. Mr. Bentivolio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the committee has obtained an internal memorandum from May 28, 2013, detailing serious concerns about the ability to certify and register navigators and assisters in the Obamacare Consumer Outreach Program. The memo reads, we are becoming increasingly concerned about the ability of CMS staff to authenticate, register, and certify everyone who will be involved in the consumer assistance process. I would like to enter this memo in the record.
Without objection.
Later, though, another top official testified that HHS decided to leave the responsibility of certifying and registering to each navigator organization. HHS rejected the option of creating a list of all certified navigators and assisters. The lack of a list exposes consumers to significant risk, since consumers that call the HHS hotline will be unable to verify if a person offering to provide them information about Obamacare is working for a legitimate organization. Were you aware that there is no way for citizens in your state to contact HHS to verify if a person offering information about Obamacare is working for a legitimate organization? Lieutenant Governor?
That's a very troubling aspect, because people want to, there's going to be a lot of confusion overall, and we need good information, and you need time to get good information there, and you need to be able to verify that.
A.G. Wilson, Attorney General?
Yes.
Okay. Secretary of Health, Clyburn, right?
Yes.
Yes. Mr. Hudson, are you aware of a poll that was released last week? 68% of Americans believe Obamacare will harm their health care. 56% of Democrats believe Obamacare will harm their health care. Are you familiar with that poll?
Yes, sir. I've seen the headlines on that.
Okay. And I have another question. I'm just going to twist things around a little bit. You said you were a realtor, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, if I understand a realtor's job, you bring a customer in, they're thinking of buying a home, you talk to them, find out what kind of home they want. You look at the listings, you show them the listings, maybe a photograph, correct? You ever sold a home to somebody?
Yes, sir. I've sold many homes to first-time home buyers.
How about somebody
that never walked into the home you sold them? Did they get to look at all the rooms? Did they get to go in the basement if you have basements? In Florida, I don't know. I think they're on slabs, a lot of them, right?
Yeah, basements are a challenge for us.
Basements are a challenge, yes, I understand. Okay, well, in Michigan, we have basements. So before a person buys a home, they get to walk in and go into each room, maybe test the appliances, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
In fact, if I can add, I would never sell a home to someone that didn't know what they were actually bargaining for, because frankly, that's one of the single largest investments in their life, their personhood, their entire family, and doing so is reckless and inappropriate.
And before they buy that home, you give them the documents, you go over the purchase agreement with them, you tell them what they're getting, right, and what they're not getting, correct?
That is absolutely correct, as well as a number of other disclosures that will help them fully understand their purchase so that they are well-informed and knowledgeable. The days of caveat emptor are gone and should be under the Affordable Care Act as well.
So you would let your customers read the contract before they signed it, correct? Or at least have their attorney or a representative read the bill, the contract, correct?
You are absolutely correct, sir.
But Senator, you disagree with that. You think we should, as legislators, vote for something that we didn't have the opportunity to read before we voted for it.
No, but there's been plenty of time now. It's a complex law, and it's going to be tough. We need to roll up our sleeves and implement it.
So I have a bill on the floor right now, or not on the floor, but in the hopper, that basically it's called Read the Bills Act. You wouldn't be a co-sponsor, but I suspect you would be, correct?
Absolutely, sir.
Thank you very much. I yield back my time, Mr. Chairman.
Would the gentleman yield to me? I think we had 20 seconds or so. Would the gentleman yield?
Yield. I yield.
Just for Ms. Clyburn, you had mentioned before as well about conflicting messages on pregnancy as a life event. Has that been resolved yet, or are you still waiting for details on that?
We are still waiting for details, and it really affects us because our policy decisions in terms of how we'll treat that population, it affects how we'll move forward on that policy, but we have not heard back.
Will the gentleman yield?
It is actually the gentleman's time. Mr. Bentivolio? Can you hold on just a moment? Will the gentleman yield to the gentlelady?
To the Secretary, isn't the reason why there is not a willingness to allow someone to acquire insurance once they know they are pregnant because we don't want people to game the system and not access the insurance when the insurance is available to them, and they choose instead to just pay the tax?
I'm not sure in terms of the rationale. All we want is an answer as to whether or not that is or is not a qualifying condition so we can make our policy decision.
But since there is an individual mandate, if everyone actually takes up the insurance, then there wouldn't be an issue about a life-changing event because, in fact, you would already have insurance. The only time it would play a role would be if, in fact, you chose not to take insurance and instead paid the $300 fee. Correct?
Correct.
So it's not the gentlelady's position that we wouldn't give some kind of prenatal care at that point because someone didn't pay the penalty.
Correct.
No, I think though the point is that an individual mandate is trying to make sure that we all take personal responsibility. That's what one of the precepts of the Republican Party, personal responsibility. We're going to provide a health care opportunity for every American to access health care, and we're going to keep the costs down. But if you choose not to, and this is a free country, if you choose not to, then you can pay a fee, which would mean that you are not going to access that health care. But that's a choice. So if, in fact, you do become pregnant, then you're going to be paying out of pocket. We, of course, want you to have prenatal care. If you're indigent, you will get prenatal care. But if you're making $75,000, $100,000 a year and you choose not to have health insurance and you get pregnant, well, you had an offer to have health insurance and you chose not to access it. I think that's why you're getting some question as to whether or not it's a life-changing event.
Again, we just want a definite answer, and so that we can move forward on any policy decisions we need to make as a state.
And just for quick clarification, they don't pay a fee; they pay a tax. Yeah, Mr. Conley.
I thank the Chair. Before my time starts counting, I would ask unanimous consent that the extra 1 minute and 10 seconds provided my good friend and colleague from Georgia be extended to me.
No, that was in a response. The person, if you ask a question at the last second, and I'm going to allow that person to be able to respond.
I thank the Chair. By the way, speaking, my friend from Georgia mentioned Newt Gingrich. Senator Hutto, do you happen to recall the reason that then Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, opposed the Clinton health care initiative? The single most important reason he objected to the 1993 initiative. Do you recall?
I don't.
It was that it lacked a universal mandate, an individual mandate. And Senator Hutto, intellectually, was that a liberal think tank that came up with the idea of an individual mandate?
It was not, but things have been turned on their head.
It was actually a conservative think tank idea. Yeah. Now it's socialism. Mr. Hudson, you introduced some legislation in HB 1193 in 2011 to prohibit a person from being compelled to purchase health insurance, objecting to the individual mandate. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you just testified to Mr. Benvolio that as a realtor, you really believe in disclosure, full disclosure, so that a consumer is fully aware of the strengths and pitfalls of a potential purchase.
That is correct.
When you introduced your bill, did you happen to mention that it was modeled almost identically on something provided by ALEC? Page 12 of that booklet pretty much mirrors your legislation. Were you aware of that?
If you are referring to something called the Healthcare Freedom Act, that was actually sponsored by Representative Plakin. I was a co-sponsor.
No, sir. I'm referring to a model bill on page 12 of that brochure provided to a conference I think you attended. Did you not attend an ALEC conference where this was discussed?
I don't have that book in front of me.
So you were not aware of the fact that your legislation happens almost identically to mimic a model bill that ALEC was encouraging State legislators such as yourself to introduce into their respective legislators? Is that your testimony under oath?
There are a number of pieces of legislation that are supported by a wide variety.
Not my question. Were you or were you not using or aware of the ALEC model on page, I think it's 12, I've got it here, that almost identically mirrors the legislation you introduced?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
So
I was aware of it.
Sir,
I'd like to finish my answer. I wasn't not civil to you.
This is my time, Mr. Hudson, and I'm
My time,
asking
too.
you a question about whether you were aware or not. Your answer, I believe, for the record is you were.
It is absolutely true.
Did you reveal that to your colleagues? Because you've just said how committed you are as a realtor to full disclosure. Was there full disclosure when you introduced that bill that you were modeling it on a national conservative movement funded by the Koch brothers and that this came from their legislative initiative?
Yes. When we had discussions on this, the term of ALEC did come up.
Thank you. Mr. Attorney General, you talked about your view about States' rights. South Carolina has a long tradition about that issue. I'm just interested in your philosophy of the law. When you lose in a legislative battle and something becomes law, even though you voted against it, and then you lose through the legal system, up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court upholds the constitutionality of that law, do you think, as Attorney General, it's still okay to try to obstruct its implementation because you just don't agree with it? Is that your legal philosophy?
No, that is not my legal philosophy.
Thank you. So would you take issue with this gentleman, whoever he is, that maybe that's really not a very good legal strategy?
You use obstruct very broadly. My concern is that a law can be constitutional and still be bad policy.
Sure.
And the debate should continue. Now, I believe the Obamacare was unconstitutional. Supreme Court disagreed with me, and I have to live with that decision. But that doesn't negate the fact that Obamacare, in my opinion, is still bad policy, and we have a duty as elected representatives to continue to try to improve it as long as it's going to be the law of the land, and that's what we're here to do today.
I couldn't agree with you more, if that's what you mean. But obstruction, that word, not his, not mine, is a different matter. Mr. Chairman, I think I have a little extra time, and I yield the balance of it to
Actually, you have none. I was just saying that Mr. Woodall's response was the witness was responding to his question at the end. Is the reason it went long. But I've been very careful on time, been very fair with everyone on that. With that, I recognize Mrs. Loomis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question for Lieutenant Governor Collier, Secretary Clyburn, and Mr. Hudson, Senator Hudson, Representative Hudson. Does Obamacare raise premiums in your state? Does Obamacare raise insurance premiums in your state? Do you know?
We have not had the full release of what it does to premiums across the board for that, and the Federal Government has not released that information for us.
Okay,
however, we have an example when we've gone to the website, and in all of the examples it shows a dramatic increase in cost.
Madam Secretary?
For some groups, up to 200%. Again, we don't have all the details in terms of, what it's going to mean for every different type of population, but we do have data that indicates for some group it will go up to a 200% increase.
Representative?
Like my colleagues before me, we lack a tremendous amount of actuarial value to be able to make good discerning judgments regarding that. And as the rules have continued to change, we can project, and the projections are not good. They will go up.
Lieutenant Governor, does Obamacare reduce choices in your state?
Absolutely, it reduces choices in the scope of plans that people can choose, and also in the number of insurers that are in the exchange.
Madam Secretary, same question.
We currently believe there will be 4 exchanges. In our Medicaid plans, we now have 5 choices for individuals who have Medicaid recipients. So in those instances, if you compare the two, it would reduce some level of choice.
Representative Hudson, do you have an answer to that same question?
Yes, it will definitely reduce choice.
What is the overall view of the citizens of your state with regard to Obamacare? Again, Lieutenant Governor.
Kansans are overwhelmingly against it. They see the economic impact and how it affects their health care.
Madam Secretary.
We've had several polls as well as debates within the legislature that indicate that overwhelmingly there is not a will to move with expansion or towards some of the implementation of the Affordable Care Act.
Representative Hudson.
Floridians are absolutely opposed to it, and they recognize in our state, like many states, that the rural areas are going to be disproportionately affected. Lack of choice, lack of access, and tremendous challenges with workforce, which makes things almost impossible to implement. A one-size-fits-all doesn't work well in clothing. It doesn't work well in this either.
Thank you. Attorney General Wilson, question for you. Obamacare's implementation has problems, delays, and will lead to greater state spending, higher insurance premiums, and greater burdens on business. Can you tell us how the law is impacting the citizens of your state? How are the delays impacting the state's ability to comply with the new Federal requirements as well? So the question is twofold. The state's ability to comply, individuals' impacts.
Well, let me qualify this by saying that independently, that is not something I'm qualified to comment on. It is my opinion, my personal opinion, that it will adversely affect our citizens in our state. My one thought, Representative, is that I'm begging Congress, if they want to criticize the criticizers of Obamacare, if they want to criticize me and other folks who share my view, I welcome that. That is part of our American process. But look at the questions we're asking as consumer advocates, and look at that independent of Obamacare. And let's look out. We have a duty as elected officials to protect the citizens. And I think right now we're getting into a debate on the merits of something that's been decided instead of how to make it better going forward. And I'm begging Congress to look at the questions the AGs have asked. Thank you.
Lieutenant Governor, could you describe the regulation process and how it's impacting Kansans as citizens and the Kansas government as well?
Yeah. There is some issues of transparency. Here it is 2 weeks before. We don't know what all of the rates are. We are getting new software updates. We have a new software update coming sometime before October 1st. So even if the navigators can't be trained up to date on that, we're having to, work overtime to try to comply.
Considering that the President of the United States, after whom the bill is named, is the person who's done the most to delay implementation of Obamacare, do you think it's appropriate to say that the obstruction is coming from outside the White House?
No, I wish they could block a number of other areas as well. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. I recognize the Ranking Member, Mr. Cummings.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Sobel, I'd like to ask you about the important role that navigators will play in helping the uninsured sign up for benefits under the Affordable Care Act. By the way, in my district, I just had 400 people Saturday morning to come out trying to find out more about this. The Attorney General has talked about, making government work. They came out because they wanted to take advantage of the law. As a lawyer, I'm trained to look at the law, and as a legislator to uphold the law. According to Ms. Sobel, according to a memorandum released this morning by the minority staff of Energy and Commerce, Navigator grant recipients will directly enroll nearly 1.1 million uninsured people in the exchanges and in Medicaid. They also expect to inform an additional 7.3 million people through public education efforts about the benefits of the Affordable Care Act. Moreover, according to the memorandum, many of these organizations are experienced in precisely the type of outreach necessary to get people enrolled in the exchanges. They have linked families in need with public and private benefits for which they are eligible, such as food stamps, Medicaid, disaster assistance, S-CHIP, the Medicare Part D benefit, by the way, which a number of people on this side of the aisle were against, but yet and still, when it became the law, we did everything in our power to make sure our constituents were informed of it, and the low-income subsidy for the Part D benefit. Finally, according to the memorandum, there are strong and effective privacy protections in place in the Navigator program. All grant recipients must abide by laws that prohibit the use or disclosure of personally identifiable information or face stiff criminal and civil penalties. Many of the grantees have adopted additional privacy practices for their staff, above and beyond those required by the Federal regulation, and have a proven track record of responsibly handling sensitive personal, financial, and health data in the course of their work. Ms. Sobel, I think we can agree that implementing the Affordable Care Act is a heavy lift. I'm not saying that there aren't any legitimate privacy concerns or that we shouldn't examine the issues of data security and navigator training. But do you think that Governor Scott's decision to ban navigators from operating on the grounds of county health departments was a necessary or even a remotely proportionate response?
Thank you for that very good question. I basically think it's a roadblock, it's a sandbag, he overreacted. There are standards in place from the Affordable Care Act about navigators, as well as Florida having in place criminal background checks and other standards that the State put forward. I think that this is an effort to stop people from enrolling, and it's just unfair, not right, and it hurts a lot of people who need the information.
Yeah, I told my constituents on Saturday, I said, it's one thing to have opportunity, it's another thing to know about it, and then to be able to take advantage of it. Do you believe that this and many of the other onerous regulations that Republican State officials and legislatures across the country have imposed on navigators are motivated by a desire to delay, hinder, and obstruct enrollment in the exchanges? I think Ms. Jackson, is it Ms. Jackson? Yeah, could you answer that? Did you hear my question? I said, do you believe that this and many of the other onerous regulations by Republican state officials and legislatures across the country have imposed on navigators are motivated by desire to delay, hinder, and obstruct enrollment in the exchanges? And by the way, I might add that it just came over the wire that the Republican conference Speaker Boehner said this morning, talking to the Republicans in Congress, every member in this room is for defunding Obamacare while letting the rest of the government continue to operate. But go ahead, you can.
I totally agree with what you're saying. As a practicing attorney in a legislature in the state of Louisiana, I've seen so much obstruction of this law. It somewhat reminds me of what I've learned in my history lessons about the civil rights structures and the right to vote that was given to minorities. States begin to obstruct those. And in Louisiana, we've seen just that example with the Federal Affordable Health Care Act.
And, Mr.
There's
Chairman,
been a major obstruction.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to enter in the record the staff report from the Commerce Committee.
Absolutely, without objection.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Horsford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to be quick because I have a number of points. First, Mr. Attorney General, just so that you know, on Wednesday, September 11, 2013, the House Committee on Homeland Security Subcommittee on Cybersecurity, Infrastructure, Protection, and Security Technologies had a hearing on this very subject around the data hubs, where we are with the implementation, and in your testimony, you talked about deadlines not being met. Those were on the record responses that were provided by the auditor, the OIG, who oversees this, and the result was the deadline was met. So while we want to have talking points that say something else, the reality is different. Mr. Chairman, I attended a brain health trust in my district this last Saturday, and one thing that was made clear to me is there is more work to be done on the implementation of the Affordable Care Act, the outreach that's necessary, the education that's necessary, the fact that people need to understand that this is in large part about expanding care under Medicaid and expanding benefits under Medicare and adopting a new marketplace under the exchange. I want to say our governor, who happens to be a Republican, who was part of the lawsuit with other states that challenged the constitutionality of the Affordable Health Care Act at the time I served in the state legislature, allowed his Director of Health and Human Services to continue to work on the implementation of the bill until the outcome of the Supreme Court's determination. And because he made that decision, Nevada is ahead of the mark on the implementation of our marketplace exchanges. They've agreed to expand Medicaid. Our navigators have been recruited and trained and are ready to do their job. And this from a Republican governor who did not agree with the law. But he understood his job was to implement the law as it was adopted and upheld, adopted by Congress and upheld by the Supreme Court. So in my state, I have far too many constituents who will benefit under the Affordable Care Act to not see it implemented. Is it perfect? No. Does this Congress need to do its job to make the necessary adjustments? Yes. And I'm glad to hear that Mr. Jordan shares my concern and those concerns of labor, particularly the AFL-CIO, on a provision of the bill that does need a congressional fix. And I would ask him, even though he's not here, if he will join me in bringing forward legislation so that we can fix that and other provisions. Let me ask my couple of questions. Senator Hutto. What happens to the millions of Americans who now have health coverage if the opponents of the ACA are successful?
Well, we hope that they're not going to be successful, but if they are successful, people could lose coverage that they have now. We hope that won't happen.
Representative Jackson, how would it affect your constituents if suddenly they had to worry about insurance companies rescinding their insurance because of pre-existing conditions?
I think we'll be in the same boat that we were in a year ago when the governor of our great state asked us to defund hospice care. We will begin to look for solutions that really weren't solutions, and our constituency would not be offered any health care at all. And if offered health care, very minimal, and forced to go into emergency rooms when there is dire need situations in health care.
And Senator Sobel, more than 32.5 million seniors have already received one or more free preventative services because of the Affordable Care Act. Can you express to the subcommittees the importance of these services to your constituents?
Absolutely. And if the bill is repealed, I believe that there would be greater hardships for our seniors. It would be sinful and shameful to repeal any part of the benefits that have already passed.
So, Mr. Chairman, I know that there are those on the other side who have different opinions about where we are with the Affordable Care Act. But after hearing from my constituents, small business owners, those in health care in my state, I believe that it's time for us to stop having these continual efforts to defund the Affordable Care Act, and it's time for us as Congress to do our jobs in implementing it and moving forward. And I would use my home state of Nevada as an example of how Republicans and Democrats, the governor, the legislature, and members here in Congress are working to do our job and not obstructing the Affordable Care Act. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'm recognized for just some closing comments. Ranking Member, Mrs. Spear.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. First of all, let me say to Attorney General Wilson, I too am very grateful for your service to this country. I was trying to make the point that all of us here have the great luxury of having a government-sponsored health insurance plan to benefit from. And the hope is that for the 45 million Americans who have no insurance whatsoever, that the Affordable Care Act will place them on an equal status with all of us. Let me also point out there's a script that is being used that isn't accurate. And when people talk about the Affordable Care Act as costing us so much money, that couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, the very nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office has said that we will save $1.3 trillion over the next 2 decades with the implementation of the Affordable Care Act. Now, as a country, we spent 18% of our gross domestic product on health care, 18%, more than the next 10 biggest spenders in the world, including Japan, Germany, France, China, the UK, Italy, Canada, Brazil, Spain, Australia, combined. And you might think, well, we get better health care. But the fact of the matter is we do not. In fact, we rank 38th in the World Health Organization's ranking of countries in terms of the quality of their health care. We rank #1 in spending and 38th in overall health care. Now, the reference made by my good friend, Mr. Jordan, and by others on the other side of the aisle about the comment made by Max Baucus has been taken out of context, and Senator Hutto, you made reference to it. And I'd like to just point out what was really being said by Senator Baucus. There was $554 million requested by the President in his budget for promotion and advertising and education on behalf of the Affordable Care Act. Our good friends on the other side of the aisle chose to strike that funding completely, and it was with that backdrop that Senator Baucus said that without promotion, without education, that there is going to be a train wreck relative to the implementation because people aren't going to know about it. So when we use the term train wreck, let's use it accurately as it reflects Senator Baucus's comment. And with that, I would like to point out finally that the hand-wringing that's going on here is all well and good. But the truth of the matter is that starting October 1st, there will be 6 months in which people will have the opportunity to enroll. They will have the opportunity to enroll until March. Lots of these kinks will be worked out during that period of time, and I think that it would be better for all of us to not be the obstructionists that some have suggested. And I'd like to end by quoting Governor Snyder from Michigan, a Republican, who said, and said it very well, "It is the law of the land, upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court, and it's being implemented. Some believe that fighting it is good politics. I believe that finding a way to make it work for our state is good government." I yield back.
Well, General, will you yield for that 1 minute?
I certainly will.
I just want to thank all of our witnesses for being here today. We may disagree, but the real deal is we're talking about our fellow Americans. We're talking about our brothers, our sisters, our neighbors. And there are people who, and I was just in, like I said, in my district this weekend, talking to some of my constituents, and there are people who really need this. I tell a story about when we voted for the Affordable Care Act. I got to the floor of the House 4 hours early. I sat on the front row, and I had only one prayer. I said, "God, don't let me die before I vote for it." And the reason why I said that is because I knew it would save lives. I knew that it would affect generations yet unborn. I knew that it would allow some mother to be able to save her child. I knew it would have a tremendous effect. We've got to make it work. I'm tired of people saying, "It's hard, this is hard." Well, a lot of things are hard. We are America. We are better than that. And so I'm looking forward to all of you all working with us, not about defunding, not about destroying, but trying to make it better. And with that, I yield back. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I would thank the witnesses for coming, being a part of this dialogue. This is in your lap in a lot of ways as far as implementation. You're the one on the phone trying to get answers, writing letters, trying to get answers, dealing with the implementation on the ground, and many of you will be on the first line of that phone call trying to be able to get things resolved. In my state, they gathered all the state leaders together last week from all the different agencies that have any connection, and they had a long list of all the unanswered questions, and so they want to get everyone together so they could pool it and find out what everyone knew and get all those answers so everyone could share it. What they did instead is they got all the state leaders together, listed the questions, and none of them had the answers. All of them assumed someone else knew this and they just weren't sharing it. None of them knew what's going on. And so again, the focus of, gosh, this is going to be great, is very different when you have to implement and when it's coming at you, and the questions come to you. I would commend to anyone's reading on this committee and outside this committee the Navigator report that was done by this committee, dealing with the issues of fraud, dealing with the exposure areas that we have that are a real risk to consumers. I mean, we've had a hearing on the Data Hub to ask some of the questions that should be asked about security because a lot of Americans' information is about to be exposed. But with the Navigators and all that's happening in the days ahead, and as we have seen the reduction of time that's now required in their training and what is there are serious issues. We do have, and I know Ranking Member has mentioned we're 38th in the world in health care. I would say in my district in central Oklahoma, we have more advanced cancer care in Oklahoma City than in all of the UK. We had a hospital open in Oklahoma City that is a straight fee-based hospital, and they were surprised to see that the first thing that happened was that Canadians started coming for health care. 25% of their business are people from outside the country that come to that hospital from all over the world. And when people are sick and they need advanced care, they're coming here to get that. The term medical tourism didn't exist years ago, but now many of our communities see it as some of the finest hospitals in the world are located right here. And the challenge is, do we put that medical advancement at risk by limiting reimbursements, limiting access to that, controlling how it's done in the days ahead, and so that the medical innovation that is currently occurring slows down, and that we suddenly become equal with the rest of the world rather than leading the rest of the world in medical innovation and device manufacturers and drug developments and such. We have to continue to press onto that. This is a bill that where there are major problems. I've heard over and over again, it's the law of the land, we should just leave it. We are not doing that with No Child Left Behind. We see that there are major issues on implementing that law, and we've now reached a time where almost every state is under a waiver. No one here is saying we need to implement all of No Child Left Behind. It is the law of the land. We need to demand every part of that is implemented. Why? Because there are major problems with the law. And we can see it based on how it's implemented, and so waivers have gone everywhere to try to free everyone up from what's happening in No Child Left Behind. We're seeing the same thing occur with the Affordable Care Act. Waivers for employers, waiver for certain people, waiver for certain group, because the problems continue to double up on this. Right now, the House and the Senate are dealing with what do we do to replace No Child Left Behind, because it's become such a problem. And in the days ahead, we will finally come to a point of saying there are so many issues and so many problems with the implementation, we have got to look again on what do we do to replace this. I look forward to the day when states are allowed to experiment, as my state now has to come begging to the Federal Government to do things to take care of the needy in my state. As a program called Insure Oklahoma, which has been a fantastic program to be able to serve people in my state of great need, which we continue to expand, now we have to beg to allow that program to continue to go forward. When health care is controlled from Washington, D.C., it's about numbers. When it's controlled in state and local areas, in counties and districts with great need, and I have many rural districts in my state, it's about neighbors, and it's about families and real lives. So at the end of this day, hopefully we brought some questions to the table that we can get a resolution on, and hopefully we can continue to focus on families and lives. Thank you again for being here and for being a part of this conversation. With this, we are adjourned.